Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the United States of a Movie Podcast. We are the movie podcast that makes every Monday a fun day because we love to get together and talk movies. But of course, we also have a purpose here on the United States of a Movie Podcast. We want to journey around this great country and find one movie to define each state in the United States. But this week, we're having a special episode because it's going to get oh so much more fun. I'm Ollie Pettigrew. I used to host EPAD on Max on Cinemax in Asia. I'm a massive movie fan, and fortunately, I found two fellas that love movies just as much as me, if not more. So let's welcome back my amazing co-host, Ryan Sandler, buddy. Welcome back to the show.
It's so great to be here. And what is this, a crossover episode?
It's a little bit of a crossover episode, yeah. This is one of those, like, it's Deadpool, Wolverine kind of sort of situations right now.
God, no,
making a lot less money. Also, as always, sitting in the middle of his very own video store, Will Hirsch, buddy. Welcome back to the show.
Great to be here. Great to be going on this road trip of a podcast with you guys to hint at what we're going to be talking about today.
Absolutely, because we did finish our first trip around America, and we're currently doing some special episodes, and we thought what would be a great episode to do is something that we have talked about a lot during season one, is the idea of the quintessential American road trip movie. And this week we had some bangers. But before we get there, we've got someone with their very own banger of a YouTube channel and their very own new podcast as well. Adam Tinius from Entertain the Elk. Welcome to the show, Adam. So happy to have you on.
So happy to be here. I got snacks packed. I got some music. I'm ready for the road trip.
Are you much of a road tripper? Because we were just talking before we started recording, we all used to live in Arizona. I very often drive across, and you grew up in Texas, which is basically the only place in the world where you always road trip when you're going anywhere.
You know what? I don't mind the road trip. I'm 6'5", and so I feel like being in tight spaces isn't made for me. The people who can the people who have the luxury of the short life, they can sleep in their car, they can lay out a bed in the back, and they can do that kind of stuff. My body isn't made for that. So wow. I don't mind the driving as much, but everything else maybe it comes with it.
Yeah, I figured you must like driving more because getting on an airplane at 6'5" must be an absolute bloody nightmare unless you're in first class.
It's all terrible. I mean, being tall is great, but the traveling parts with all that is terrible.
God, my parents couldn't even be in the same house as one another, so let alone doing a road trip. So I had to live vicariously through road trip movies to get the full effect.
Well, and that's honestly, we've talked about on the podcast a lot. I mean, that's when I came up with the idea of the podcast, is because I sort of I'm British, as you might be able to notice, but I was basically born American, and everything that I learned about America, I learned from American movies. And I've lived here now for 10 years. And it honestly is very fascinating to me to see wow, it's much like it is in the movies. I remember my first trip to LA when I saw the Beverly Hills Police Department. I'm like, oh, from Beverly Hills Cop.
You're basically like Superman, but instead of being raised by two farmers, you were shot straight into a Blockbuster Video.
Yeah, and I've been living there ever since. But I tell you what, this is the perfect episode to have you on. Now, if you don't know Adam at home, like I said, he's got a great YouTube channel, Entertain the Elk. He's notorious for doing these great video essays about movies. And I was just getting lost in your feature-length video where you were approaching every movie from all 50 states. But you have now, as a result of that, actually started your own podcast, kind of taking a similar journey to ours. Why don't you just tell us about it?
Yeah, thanks. It's called 50 States of Cinema, and great minds think alike. I'm also really enamored by setting and how it's used as a window into different worlds, and how that becomes part of the story itself. Even before I did states, I had videos on how bathrooms are used in movies to help tell a story, and how diners are used to tell a story. And so I remember coming across the idea of states and how that can be used, and how it can be a window into different worlds. Actually, I don't know if you guys are big Sufjan Stevens fans or not. I'm a big Sufjan Stevens fan, and if you know, you know. If you don't, I'll tell you. Some of his first two big albums, he had one called Illinois, and he had one called Michigan, and all of those on those albums, each track is things about the state and places and things and history. and they're my favorite of his. And the idea when he launched it, he was like, "I want to do all 50," and he stopped at 2, unfortunately. But I was listening to them during the pandemic, and I was like, "Man, it'd be really cool to examine film in that way, to break down like love letters to different states
That's
and how
cool.
films can examine it that way." So I'm picking up the torch from where Sufjan left it off. And
I'm
gonna try and
curious how
continue
he
it.
would attack Delaware.
Yeah. In North Dakota. Like,
After
what would
watching, yeah, seriously, like after doing all the states and then watching your video essay on all the states, it was like so interesting to see how our choices aligned or didn't align, or
Yeah.
you know, how you included certain like really offbeat movies. Like we're huge fans of The Wraith.
Yeah.
You mentioned that, like for Arizona. You even mentioned, dare I say, Hiding Out, which is a fucking insane movie.
That was amazing that you brought up
Like,
Hiding Out. I was
yeah.
like, did he watch it? Are we the only humans who watched it?
I saw the John Cryer clip and I did the Leonardo DiCaprio point at my television. Like, no.
Arizona, for you Arizona boys, like there are some insane movies, and
Yeah.
there's some weird ones.
Oh,
I think I likened Minnesota and Arizona of like
Yes.
the frozen kind of like tundra of nothingness and like the desert landscape and the
Yeah.
insane things that happen in both
There's like
places.
mystical, it's a mystical place. It's crazy.
Like you walk out into this vast nothingness and like
Yeah.
the batshit crazy things that can happen there. Oh, can I curse
Yeah.
on this podcast?
Oh,
Yeah,
100%.
please.
Okay, go
It's encouraged.
crazy.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Don't
like-
have to give someone the editor extra work at the end. What did you
I'd
guys
say-
do for North Dakota? Because I had nothing for North Dakota.
Was that
We
Badlands?
cried. We
That's South
cried
Dakota.
and gave up.
Oh, wait, yeah, what did we
Right,
do for
exa-
North Dakota?
we
You know
did we did
Leprechaun?
Leprechaun, Monster Trucks, and
Yeah.
Logan.
yeah.
Yes,
Okay, Logan.
that's-
Logan was the one people were like, "You should have done Logan." I was like, "Oh, I didn't think about that." I guess you were there again because it was a road trip movie, and I think I
Yeah.
tried not to do road trip movies because you're passing. You're not like it's not the state isn't the main character because you're passing through multiple
Yeah.
states. But
Yeah.
if
It was
people are
definitely me
desperate for a pick,
cheating for that one because
Hey.
I wanted to talk Logan, especially with Deadpool Wolverine coming.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
kind of like nicely timed. One thing that I do like is that you figured out quickly something that it took us about 9 episodes to get into, was the idea between set in versus shot in.
Right.
Because
Mhm.
we had
Yeah.
a great episode to do with North Carolina. We had a good friend of ours, Beth Troutman. She knows a lot about movies in North Carolina. She was on the North Carolina Film Commission. But she brought, was it Last of the Mohicans and Dirty Dancing? 2 movies set in New York, but
Oh, uh-huh.
famously shot in North Carolina. And the fact is that you can't have, Last of the Mohicans without that incredible iconography. And the town where they shot Dirty Dancing has like a Dirty Dancing festival. They've got Dirty Dancing tours. And so, yeah, we kind of like, getting into the ideas. You don't necessarily have to shoot in the state for it to be
Right.
about that state.
Yeah.
Because we've had some pretty interesting ones, which are like, like last week we did best like foreign movies shot in America,
Yeah.
like things that were shot in Serbia, things that were shot in, Rumble in the Bronx, famously shot in Vancouver, with
Yeah.
those
It's fucking
amazing
wild.
New York
Yeah.
mountains in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah,
mentioned
I-
Crawl too. Yeah. That
Oh
was-
yeah, yeah. I think for me, it's when I was researching and going state by state. Obviously, there's almost more examples of movies that like weren't filmed somewhere, but they're trying to kind of like replicate that. And for me, it's all about what are you trying to evoke? What are you trying to capture? Because you're trying to say something by setting it there. And so, even like for New Mexico, I picked my favorite being The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That doesn't even take place in the country, but it's trying to evoke something. This like kind of alternate reality of like a civil war. I found really interesting. I think I mentioned Power of the Dog, which I believe was shot in Australia.
Shot in
It's
New
supposed to be
Zealand,
yeah.
Wyoming. Oh, is it New Zealand? And it's
Yeah.
supposed to be Wyoming, I think. Yeah, it's all about like the setting for me because it'd be so weird to pick something just because it's shot there randomly to save money. You're not capturing it doesn't look like it. It doesn't. You're not getting the feeling of it, the towns and anything. But I'm definitely getting yelled at in my comments for like,
Oh,
what
yeah.
about this movie? What
Yeah.
about that movie? It's like,
for sure. It's
not-
unavoidable. It's
yeah.
unavoidable. Yeah. The
Yeah,
only
it
time
helps
like
the
we've
algorithm.
had no pushback is when I picked Son-in-Law.
What was that one
God.
set?
I can't remember.
In hell.
I can't remember.
It was
Iowa, or something like that?
Tennessee, maybe?
Yeah.
It's one of those
Oh,
smaller
my
ones. Yeah.
See, that's the thing, because like it's tricky because
Yeah.
with your approach, you're picking one movie. For us, it was like, all right, because we were building it from scratch. We're like, all right, we each was sort of bringing a movie to the table. But what it's
Yeah.
been has been such a joy. I was just talking about it over breakfast with my wife because the movies we had this week were absolute bangers.
Yeah.
And it's the fact that it takes us back down roads that we haven't been for a while, or bring movies into our life that we'd never
Yeah.
pick. You know, 'cause
Mhm.
we've had such a, I mean, we've done something in the region of 175 movies in the last 60 something weeks, and
Crazy.
we've done some absolute classics, and we've had, I mean, for me, it's the Hard Tickets to Hawaii, it's the Miami Connections, The Wraith, some of these like movies
Stone
that are
Cold, man. Stone Cold.
Stone Cold. Oh
Yeah.
man, Stone Cold
Yeah.
is what a, if I'm amazed that I hadn't seen that
Yeah.
movie. It's classic 90s action. And then there's also things like, I remember Will discovering like the River Wild, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just these
Yeah.
complete
Great. Yeah.
surprises that came out of nowhere.
That for me, when I was doing like all these movies from different states, so many comments, and even for myself, I was purely doing research, and you're seeing these movies, and you're like, damn, I'd never heard of this movie. I need to watch this. I need to
Yeah.
examine this. And there's so many, and people were commenting on my video because I mentioned probably a couple hundred movies, and they're like, man, this is like a my next watch list of things
Yeah.
that you're showing clips of or talking about briefly. Well, because what's cool about your show is that you can share like the love from a state. So because like for me, I'm landing on one, which is hard, and I'm trying to give love by sprinkling just kind of clips very quickly.
Mm.
But a lot of mine, it's kind of hard. It's kind of unavoidable to kind of land in the big cities of these states because that's where a
Yeah.
lot of like the prominent movies
Yeah.
are. But with you guys, you could pick, a state, and then you could go like big city, small town, something in between.
sure.
So you guys are able to hopefully spread the love a little bit as opposed to maybe always sticking with like we got to pick one, and we're
Right.
in like how do you like, even for Texas, like I grew up in Texas,
Yeah.
Dallas is widely different than Waco or El Paso or the Panhandle, and so getting to
You'd think
encompass a
so,
lot more
because
helps.
our first episode, California, there's only 3,000 movies to choose from.
Yeah,
We all
impossible.
individually accidentally picked LA-based crime heist movies. We had Point
Yeah.
Break, Ambulance, and Heat. I'm like, guys, how have we
It's-
done this?
It's the
You've
craziest
really
thing. like,
encompassed California
yeah, I
filmmaking.
you kind of, and that's the thing we learned is like with each episode, you just kind of, you go with your gut, with your initial thought and your picks, and then you dissect it. And then we never really know what we're going to pick until the very end of the episode. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And
So-
after doing all the episodes we've done, we've never been wrong once, ever.
Yeah. Never made a wrong
No
choice.
error,
Yep.
batting 1,000.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
guys, so when you guys are coming with a movie, do you? Well, you can't surprise each other because you need to watch
Right.
it beforehand.
Right.
Right.
But are you just kind of like, here's my pick, no notes, or is it like you're like, hey, let's all try and encompass different things, or do you guys surprise each other with your picks?
We kind of, it's sometimes it seems like obvious. Sometimes it's like there's a fight over a movie, but we don't really get into it. But very often it's like one of us will commit to a movie, then the other two are like, okay, all right, interesting, and just kind of
Mhm.
get in there and explore it. Which is why this week's choices are fantastic. So we've got 3 movies that were a pure, honestly, joy to watch.
Yeah.
Like some of them, like for example, one of the movies, I mean, honestly, 2 of the movies I don't think I've seen for over 25 years. And it was a thrill. So I tell you what, well, the way we get things started is, Adam, what was the movie that you brought to the table? The one that you sort of, when we thought, road trips, you were like, I know what I'm going to pick.
This was the perfect example of making my video and being like, dang, I've never seen that movie. I think we all have gaps in our film knowledge.
Yeah.
And you're like, how the hell have I not seen this movie yet? And so when you offered up road trip movies, I was like, I've never seen Thelma and Louise. I've heard it's so iconic. It's referenced so many times. This is the time to jump at it. So I picked Thelma and Louise.
And it was, so Ryan, you'd never seen Thelma and Louise.
I'd never seen it either. Yeah. That's the thing is growing up in that time, like growing up with like The Simpsons and all these animated shows, you see all of the parodies and pastiches. So it's like, oh, I feel like I've seen this movie. I get it. I've seen, like, I understand the dynamic of it. But Adam, the beauty about, like, we say this on the podcast all the time, is like you're kind of forced to, even if you've seen the movie like 80 times, you're forced to rewatch it subjectively because you're thinking about it in the context of like, okay, what is everyone else going to think of this film? So watching it like from that standpoint, it's such an interesting way to see a movie with fresh eyes, which I love every single week.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned The Simpsons, and it sounds like you grew up on The Simpsons also.
Yeah.
It's kind of avoidable maybe with our age group, but it's like when you're a kid growing up, you see all of these movies. It's so funny, like going to film school and you're like, oh, Simpsons. There's The Simpsons.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
it's which is why we all love The Simpsons.
It's impossible not to see like Little Women and not hear Moe's reading in your head.
Exactly, I know exactly what you're talking about. And so it always, you have to kind of like, okay, let me shove out what The Simpsons did. And
Yeah,
not
it's
try and
hard.
think. It's funny. You got again. You mentioned Little Women. I watched the Little Women for the first time with my wife a couple years ago, and I was like, wait, it didn't end with them saying like they're no longer little girls, they're little women.
Little
Like,
women.
but that's how
Yeah.
that's what Mo said. My wife's like, that's not how the effing movie ends.
I've been lied to my whole life.
Yeah.
Which
But you're
Little
totally
Women?
right. Getting to watch it with fresh lens, and I think what's super important the more you watch movies is like you got to put your mind in like this when it was made. So
Yeah.
because it's so easy to be like,
Oh yeah.
why is this special? It's two women on the run, okay. But when you're like, okay, but this was the early
Yeah.
90s.
Yeah.
What was coming out then? Were two women kind of they weren't even that old. I mean, Gina Davis might have been like in her 20s, and maybe Susan Sarandon was maybe in her 30s or 40s, but maybe even that was that like just not on camera that often. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's very important for context to put yourself
Yeah.
in the place and watch it with that kind of lens.
Yeah,
Well, it's a
Go ahead.
feminist sort of like very much sort of like regarded as being that sort of like that feminist movie. You've got those sort of two leads. You've got the writer Callie Curry. She goes on to win the Oscar
Yeah.
for best screenplay and things like that. And then you've got Ridley Scott, and this is Ridley Scott. I mean, like I was going to say peak Ridley Scott, but the thing is, Ridley, he either absolutely nails it or he just doesn't. You know, like but like The Last Duel. I mean, if you haven't seen The Last Duel, watch it because that
Yeah.
is like Ridley Scott absolutely on fire.
Ridley Scott doing Rashomon.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, very much. That movie was fantastic.
It was
I
good.
liked it. Yeah, I liked it.
So I'm like, I did see. So I haven't watched Napoleon yet, but I see there's one that's 43 minutes longer that's now on Apple Plus, and you better believe I'm tempted.
What was the tweet that I sent? You said it was 43 hours long.
Yeah.
I
Because
don't know
like,
why that's become like the secret that people do. They're like, so none of you guys like this movie, but guess what? I got 45 minutes more of this thing.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
like,
hang
it's
on.
two,
Yeah.
Now can I interest you?
the two
Yeah.
Zack Snyder movies on Netflix.
And I was the other
oof.
day, I just watched it was Michael Mann, the director's cut of Black Hat. And I was like, because I remember seeing the original, I was like, yeah, all right, whatever. And I watched this one, like it's so much more watchable. Like it makes
Mm.
perfect sense. Like the way it's structured makes so much more sense.
I will say,
Different
like
movie.
Ridley Scott, because you've got Kingdom of Heaven, the theatrical release, which just bombed. It wasn't very highly regarded. And then I started hearing about years ago was the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven, which is over an hour longer. And it is one of his best movies he's ever made. It's like I tell everybody, I'm like, it's the 2-star movie that goes to a 5-star movie by just why they destroyed that movie. I do
It's
not know.
half the kingdom, twice the heaven. Let's go.
So yeah, no, Thelma Louise, you know, you've got Hans Zimmer's guitar, like he's got that theme and everything.
Yeah.
It's beautifully shot. But it's not the only great road trip movie that we chose. Will, what are one of the other movies that we brought to the table?
I only had one choice. Like when we landed on road trip movies, I'm like, I know it. I got the perfect one.
Yep.
It's unbeatable. It's Beavis and Butthead Do America.
Yep.
It's like I can't
It's
tell
an
you how many
iconic
times I
classic.
watched this like as a kid.
Mhm.
It's embedded in my head.
I
And
have
it's
a-
what I think of when I think of road trip
I have a
movies.
funny story about this movie because I remember seeing it in the theater in 1995, and my dad and I used to go to the movies all the time. Like that was our thing. And he took I took him to see this movie because he was also a Beavis and Butthead fan. And I remember getting to the theater with my dad and then seeing like a group of my best friends like sitting up front. So I'm like, this story breaks my heart to this day. I still think about it. Like I ditched my dad to go sit with my friends to watch Beavis and Butthead. And like, I didn't think of it at the time. Like, whatever. I'm hanging out with my friends. I'm like, meanwhile, my dad's sitting back there just eating popcorn by himself, watching Beavis and Butthead Do America. Like I tell him about it. He's like, I don't give a shit. But it was like, I think about that all the time. So I always associate this movie with my dad.
I tell you what, I was when we put Beavis and Butthead on the list, a small part of me was worried because I remember I haven't watched this since I was like a teenager, and I
Yeah.
was like, I hope this movie's good.
It's
And,
another rub of this podcast too. Like
you never know.
Mm.
You know, I got into it and I was just a teenager all over again, and I'm just giggling all through this movie. I'm telling my wife the next day, I was like, that movie is, I don't know why, man. It is just funny.
It
That is just
fucking
a
works.
funny
It
movie, man.
works. You get the crazy Godzilla style opening, then the Isaac Hayes musical intro. It's fantastic. I had this soundtrack of this on CD. I have.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
yeah. Great
Guys,
soundtrack.
I got to be the pee in the pool. I did not like this movie.
You didn't like it.
Oh, man.
So here's my question: was this?
Yeah,
your
I'm sorry.
First
Get
viewing.
it out there.
Was this a first viewing?
So you know what? I probably watched it not in theaters. I probably watched it on TV when it was like replaying on HBO or something when I was a kid. And I think I remember being like amused by it at the time, but here's my experience with Beavis and Butthead. I don't know, I'm sure how old you guys are. I'm 38. So I'm like right there. I'm maybe a couple years younger than it. Because I remember it was one of the first shows that my parents were like, you're not allowed to watch this. And so that was the reason I wanted to watch it. And by the time I was like, okay, you can finally watch it, I was like, oh, well, all the fun's kind of gone.
Right.
I'm not really getting it.
The forbidden fruit has been tainted.
The forbidden, yeah. It's like once you say I can watch it, it's like, well, now I don't know if I want to. And I don't know why it doesn't work for me, because I like Mike Judge and I love King of the Hill is like my sweet spot. Love King of the Hill and pretty much everything else he's done. It's just you're hanging the entire movie on these two characters that feel very one note to me about like, and they never like shut the fuck up from like that laugh. That's just like, if either you love it or you don't.
Sure. Yeah.
And if you don't like it from like from the opening minute, you're like, oh, I got to watch another hour and 20 minutes of this. And so I'm going to save the rest of my opinions for when we dive into it. If there's a detonated point for it, but I want to hear y'all's perspectives, and I want you guys to bring me onto your side, because I want to be on your side.
The thing is, the great thing is that because people are entitled to their opinions, right or wrong. For example, Will doesn't like Twister. It's just he's got to leave,
and we never bring it up.
And nobody's ever gotten mad in the comments about it.
Have you seen the sequel?
Oh yeah, there was a whole thing we talked about. I would go see it in 40x. I saw it in 40x. Yeah. I saw it in
1DX.
I'm currently the video I'm working on right now is this, man, I did not like the new one, but man, I rewatched the original. That thing might be flawless. That thing is a banger.
We agree. Well, Ryan and I agree with you. That's one of those that goes on the list of like perfect.
Again, I need to go on record. I didn't hate it. I didn't hate the original.
You hated it. You hated it. So we can.
You know what? Fine. Mask off. It was stupid. I don't even think Twisters are real.
Well, I tell you what, though, I'm pretty sure there's that one movie left on this list that I think everyone is going to be on board with, because I just watched it yesterday.
Yeah.
And I think it might be one of the best movies I've ever seen. Ryan, why don't you introduce it?
I picked Midnight Run, another like blind spot in that genre and era of films. I just never seen it. It was like always on my list, but it was another one I'm like, I feel like I've seen this movie before, but this was like the original, this was like the genesis of that kind of genre.
Yeah, 1988, Martin Brest, a couple years after he did Beverly Hills Cop. This is, in my opinion, Martin Brest's best movie. It's just Robert De Niro, Charles Grodin, the chemistry between those two guys. But for me, it was just like, I haven't seen it. I reckon I saw this about 30 years ago. I remember seeing it. I remember because John Ashton's in it as well from Beverly Hills Cop. I remember it sort of being funny. But like I was texting the guys, because very often we'll have our text thread going while we're watching movies. That one, I mean, I was saying to the missus, every time there is a plot point, it goes for 5 minutes before whatever the trajectory is, it changes. And it changes. And it changes and changes and changes and changes. But it never gets hard to follow. It never gets too much. It never gets confusing. It is just so thoroughly entertaining that by the end of it, my only regret is that I rented it instead of buying it, because that is a movie that I want in my collection. It was absolutely fantastic. Now I throw it to you guys. Did you guys like the movie too? Because I loved it.
Adored this movie. Oh yeah,
it was awesome. I hadn't seen it before either, and I'm so glad y'all recommended it, because you always heard about people mentioning it. If you've ever seen those like Letterboxd, when people like interview people from Letterboxd, and they're like, "What are your top 4?" Randomly, this movie will eke into the top 4 a lot. And I was like, man, I've never seen this movie. I loved it. It was fantastic.
Well, this is amazing that like for such movie fans that we have on this podcast, and then like
it's crazy.
Anna, with your own extensive knowledge and videos, to have not seen Thelma and Louise and Midnight Run, is
you guys helped
amazing.
me out. You guys helped me out. I scratched 2 off the list finally.
Yeah, this podcast has really like filled a lot of holes for us, so to speak.
For sure. And I love how it's cool seeing a theme play out when you have all the movies, and you're like, so we have 2 people on the run from the police. That's basically what like all the, whether they know it or not.
And it makes you like look back. Like I was looking at, when you look at a list of like road trip movies, they weirdly fit into these pockets. It's always like two people, one of like they usually absolutely hate each other, but they end up developing this chemistry. Like I think I was recently watching Due Date with Robert Downey Jr. and Zach Galifianakis. It's like they all kind of follow these same tropey mechanics, but they're still always so enjoyable.
Yeah,
Or
I
you
mean,
get like a Trains, Planes, and Automobiles, or you get like a Harold and Kumar or a Road Trip. Like it's so weird that you can distill these road trip films down into their own subcategories.
yeah, I mean,
Right.
we did Badlands, we did Logan. What is it?
Yeah.
Two people on the
I
run.
made
Same
a
thing.
I made a list of all the road trip movies we've done. We did Dumb and Dumber, Tommy Boy, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. We did Detroit Rock City, and our favorite road trip movie, Gone Girl.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Good,
The-
good call. I
the
thought
best
about
one,
Mad
yeah.
Max Fury Road, but I was like, oh, different country.
Yeah.
That's just current day Australia.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, look, I'll tell you what. I think what I'm going to do. I think we're going to save Midnight Run for the end. Well, why don't we kick things off with the one that Adam's got some hot takes on? I'm interested in this. Let's start off with Beavis and Butthead Do America, written and directed by Mike Judge. Now, and you were sort of talking about. I think age has very much kind of got something to play with it because I'm 43. I was there, you know, back in the days when MTV actually had music on it. And, you know, you'd watch Beavis and Butthead. And I remember that there was this sort of a palpable excitement about the idea that they've made a feature-length sort of like Beavis and Butthead movie. And then you started getting like the rumors of Bruce Willis, Demi Moore, like turning up in this movie. Like, oh, yeah. Okay.
Robert Stack, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Robert Stack. I love every line he has in this movie.
That was the only thing I forgot about this. Is
Make them deep.
the amount of cavity searches as a running gag kind of wore thin for me on this this rewatch, but everything else, like, it's just silly. It just made me, it like brought back all these feelings. It just made me laugh from nonstop.
I still remember my favorite line. It's funny because I mentioned it to my missus last night over dinner, and she brought up the same line. But it's the, like, you know, damn it, we're FBI. Don't ever end a sentence with a preposition. And it's like those two fellas in whose cabin they were whacking. And it's
in whose camper
better.
they were whacking. Yeah.
So we'll set up the premise for those of you if you haven't seen Beavis and Butthead Do America. What is the premise? Essentially, it doesn't really matter. Their TV gets broken. It gets stolen at the beginning, so they go out trying to find a TV. They accidentally get hired by Bruce Willis to murder his wife, Demi Moore, in Vegas. And then they end up also with a chemical warfare special thing as they travel across America, which all ends up with the FBI trying to hunt them down. We're in the White House. It's just classic Beavis and Butthead with a bit of cornhole.
The bit with like the Chelsea Clinton cameo, which I remember in the trailer, somehow forgot about it. The line delivery when he's like, I see you have braces. I have braces too. And then it just cuts to him being thrown out the window. It's fantastic. I adore this movie. I adore it. It's so bad.
I can totally understand though, like especially it wearing thin, because I know a lot of people where Beavis and Butthead just does not work for them, and I get it. And even the show, I loved the show as a kid, but I would never watch an entire, like, I don't own it on DVD or anything because like for me usually I'm like they're good in like small chunks, like, and I remember when the movie was coming out, I'm like, ooh, this might be too much. And it's a good thing it's under 90 minutes because I think if you cross to that 90-minute threshold, you'd be like, okay, we need to head out. But
100% agree, 100%. It's a tight 90. It's what it needs to be. It wraps up just when it needs to. You don't want it to stay along too long. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and even the new show, I was telling you guys, the new show's fine. I really only like it when they jump to like Beavis and Butthead have aged in real time. And now they're like
Which like is somehow so sad. Like
they're now like just old Gen Xers on, like Buttheads on disability. There's like that is really funny. But like when they cut back to like their teenage stuff, I'm like, all right, I'm not interested anymore. So I totally get that, but it's my favorite kind of comedy plot, which is main characters involved in an insane story, and they're either ignorant to it or they just don't care about like what's going on around it. Like that's always funny to me. Like the best South Park episodes work like that, where like the kids are like doing their own thing. They're trying to get their like game sphere. And meanwhile, there's like a war between like two sci-fi alien races, and they're just not interested.
Exactly.
I think I can see when I finished the movie, I was like, I can see why people like this. Obviously, it's well made. Obviously, it's like it's well written. Like there's satire there. I see what they're doing. It's just it's hung on two unlikable characters for me that I find grating. The way I kind of landed on it at the end was like certain things hit you at a certain age and you watch it and they just click. For me, that was like Jim Carrey talking out of his butt.
Yeah.
Right.
That and like if you could be maybe like 5 years above that or 5 years below it, and you're like, I'm kind of it's not hitting me, but it hit Jim Carrey hit me at the right time. I'm sure my parents didn't really like it, and I'm sure my kids won't like it. But for me, it was that sweet spot. So that's what I took it as, where it's like Beavis and Butthead was a sweet spot for certain people. I was a little too young for it. So when I got there, I was already watching South Park then, or I was watching Simpsons or whatever. And those were kind of hitting the animation thing for me, where Beavis and Butthead
I
was.
have the exact same sort of reaction and feeling like you do towards Beavis and Butthead to Rick and Morty, which is a huge show. Everyone loves it. But I've put it on. And like I said, I'm a bit older. It's more sort of, I think it skews a little bit more millennial. But like, I don't like the way he sort of half burps all the time, you know, and I'm like, and that puts me off the show. And so I don't watch it. So I 100% get what you mean about
That's interesting.
If you find that laugh grating, then you're going to be like, by the end of the movie.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Then it's not going to work for you.
I had this certain ways too. Like I think I was talking, who was I talking? You mentioned like Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and people are like, I just can't stand Charlie's voice. And I'm like, you can't, once you can't like separate yourself from that, you're just immediately turned off. You won't give it a chance. And it's so funny you say that about Rick and Morty, because I think for the writing, you would really appreciate some of those episodes.
I watched, there was one episode, was the one where they all have the Quarto. The Quarto episode. Okay.
Another Quarto?
I was laughing my ass off. But
shit, he's got a little knife. I love it. But you know,
there are certain things where it's like the director gives you like at the very beginning, like, here's what you're signing up for. Do you want this? And either it's kind of like, this is the ride you're going on. So either you're down from the beginning, or you're like, oh, I'm not down.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of is what it is. You're signing up for the ride.
I was at that fucking sweet spot when Beavis and Butthead came out. Like I remember staying up late because it was on like after 10 o'clock and seeing it. And the episodes were like 9 minutes long, and half of it was just them making fun of the music videos, which is arguably like my least favorite part, going back and rewatching them. They don't hold up. But like hearing that this was coming out was such a huge deal. Like it was the same thing like when the Simpsons movie came out. You're like, wow, you're getting a feature-length version of this show that you adore. And for me, it still worked. And then going back to revisit it, like all of that nostalgia came flooding back, and I had a smile on my face the entire time. But I can completely see how, a few years one way or the other could really take you out of that connection.
For me, a big part of like my memory of this movie was Roller Coaster with the Red Hot Chili Peppers as well, because that came out, that was number one in the US. I think it was number one in the UK as well. But let me see.
I forget if that song was made for this movie.
Well, yes,
was it?
Yeah, so they did it. It's a cover, but then it was specifically done for the movie. I remember the animated video that sort of goes along with it. So yeah, so it was very much part of the marketing of the movie was this Red Hot Chili Peppers song. As
the soundtrack as a whole, like the whole soundtrack was a big portion of this film too.
Of course, because it's MTV. You know what I mean? So it's like, that was another thing, is that for me the soundtrack is great. And then I think Bruce Willis is great.
Bruce Willis and Demi Moore, like getting the two of them.
Yeah, right. The height of them being, married couple as well. It was so surprising. But he's like, I really liked what Bruce was doing actually in this movie, like just with the the constant like swigging of the whiskey and all this kind of stuff. But I dug it. What did you guys think?
I loved it, and you get that part too. Like I always forget is the Rob Zombie like animated segment when he takes the peyote. Like that's like that shit still looks so fucking cool. Like that was such a treat to see how good the animation was for this film, considering it was 95. Like I love that traditional animation style.
No, I took a note on that. The animation is gorgeous. The film looks great. Like there's like a little grain on the animation. Like that was a 2 thumbs up for me. It looks the movie looks fantastic. I love the animation style.
For me, though, I'm such a sucker for cornholio, and I've forgotten about it. He's on the
The
plane.
run up to it on the plane.
Yeah, that's the bit. The bit on the plane where he's just, that's when I just started laughing like a
It's him
teenager again. I
sitting
go,
next
no,
to
still funny.
And it's Cloris Leachman, right? Doing
Yeah, Cloris
the old lady. Like that whole interaction with Beavis and her, him taking the not speed pills, like the no dose, whatever it was,
Yeah,
and then
the caffeine pills.
slowly becoming Cornholio to this, like when he pops his head up and he's like picata, just great. It's fucking great. It still like brings a joy to my heart, and the animation, like just everything about it is like when he goes into the cockpit and he's like, you said, and this whole thing from the trailer is great.
It's so stupid. I mean, it's just
great.
like, like, and this chick's pretty cool. Like, we're talking about sluts. There's gonna be sluts in Vegas, and I'm just
And
like,
much like
stupid.
the
And I love
parallel to like this and Midnight Run, where it like starts on a plane, but then they have to get off of the plane to get into a car, like to go on this road trip. It's a real planes, trains, and automobiles situation.
I think that's a favorite trope of mine throughout like a lot of road trip movies is they always start with like a plane, and but then the movie has to figure out like, but that solves everything too fast. So how do they get off the plane? Is just like a favorite trope of mine. I just love that this movie, like it's just so stupid. Like it's like the little things that get me, like when they're at Yosemite, or they're at Old Faithful, and the guide is like, oh, this, every 15 minutes it spurts out X, number of gallons of water. It just Butthead's like, so guy just has no comeback for that. He's just like completely defeated by these two idiots.
It's funny doing these as a road trip. And like I tried to like be consciously aware of the America of it all, like like where do they start, where do they end up, what are like kind of the landmarks that they get to see. And this one you do get a lot of it. Like you get the Vegas of it, you get Yellowstone, you get
Grand Canyon.
The Grand Canyon, you get the Arizona desert. Like you get a lot of these kind of like little pockets of America, which I appreciated.
I think that's what keeps like it going really fast. I think that's why it's a fun genre, because it's if moments ever like slowing down or starting to drag, like we're on to the next thing, we're going again. And so even Beavis and Butthead, and probably all these movies you could say, but in Beavis and Butthead, there's like just vignettes. Like here's a little moment, okay, and now we're back in the car, or now we're walking. Here's a vignette, and here we go. So it never drags. I'll say that.
It's the one thing you don't like after all three of these movies, you don't really get with like Thelma and Louise. It's not like you don't get this like distance of it, even like Midnight Run, because he starts in New York and he goes to like it really runs the gamut of cross country. Whereas Thelma and Louise, it's maybe like a state or two, right?
It's American
like,
Southwest.
Yeah, it's just it's way more condensed.
Because they're Arkansas, right? Because they're like that's where they start off, and then and then they deliberately avoid Texas. They go north through Oklahoma and all that kind of stuff. But we'll get to that. We'll get to the Thelma and Louise of it all. But like the other thing that I remember about Beavis and Butthead, especially the movie, is that because Beavis and Butthead came first before we had King of the Hill, that whenever I see King of the Hill, I always go, it's the voice of the neighbor.
Right. Yeah.
Quick, or I'm the opposite. Or I'm the opposite, because I saw King of the Hill first, and then I was like, oh, he's just doing Hank Hill right there.
Like you see interviews or hear Mike Judge do, like you hear his natural voice, and he does sound very like Hank Hill-y. I can't like for a million years picture him doing the voices of Beavis and Butthead. Like
I know
such a crazy thing.
You can hear it in Butthead. I had to look it up because I was like, does he do Beavis too? And I was like, holy shit, he does.
Like to
crazy
laugh like that constantly. I think the most famous thing was maybe it was like Conan, where he gets a voicemail from someone and it's the Boomhauer voice. Like someone leaves him a voicemail, and that's how he got the idea for Boomhauer, which is crazy. And like just
really
to see the genesis of that.
Yeah, he's really good at voices. And what I didn't know, I don't know if you guys watched the TV show also, Beavis and Butthead. Was it always canonically? Was it always set in Texas, or was that just for the movie? Because I didn't know that.
It's funny because I looked that up as well. Actually, like wait a minute, are they in Texas? And I look up and it's Highland, Texas. So I don't think it's ever like part of the show.
I didn't know that until I just watched Beavis and Butthead do the universe, where they explicitly say it's in Highland, Texas. Like you go back to the show, I don't know if it's ever really.
It's not like it's not like as much of a character as say like King of the Hill.
Right.
But I think they're both set in Texas for that sort of reason. But yeah, I spotted the same thing, and I actually went Googling, going, wait a minute, they've been in Texas this entire time. Oh, I didn't get that one.
I think that's why I love King of the Hill so much, because growing up, because like that the King of the Hill is based in like where I grew up in like suburbs of Dallas, and that's where like Office Space is located. It's where a lot of Mike Judge stuff is located. So seeing that, it's like, oh, he's putting his Texas roots in there in Beavis and Butthead, but I mean, you're not really getting anything Texas besides maybe that kind of Hank Hill kind of character voice, that kind of drawl.
Yeah, that's funny that because I always assumed they were Beavis and Butthead were in California, but now that you say all that, now it makes sense, because I'm like, oh yeah, Daria moves to California, and Daria's a spinoff of Beavis and Butthead.
Oh, I never knew that. Really?
Yeah, she was a character who would show up, and so
she's in this movie.
I didn't notice.
Is she really?
Yes, she's in the circle when they're singing Lesbian Seagull.
Oh my god! Another like when they kick the fucking door down and just he's like. He knows his Miranda rights, and they just beat the shit out of him. Jesus Christ!
See,
I think very Texas.
That was a great moment, and I laughed at that, and I realized that all of my favorite moments were the moments when Beavis and Butthead weren't there, and I was like, man, I think I would like this movie. I just can't. When you can't get past the characters, again, it's like you're just not going to do it. So you try and find things you do like, and obviously, it's a well-made movie. And so I did like a lot of those scenes when it's like the policemen talking about their grandma or whatever, or this and that. Like those scenes really worked for me.
Sure.
Yeah,
I get that. Yeah,
it's like I remember it did pretty well. And I mean, I looked that up. Yeah, and I mean that's a $12 million budget. It made 63 million. You know,
and we didn't get a new movie until like 25 years later.
Until like 2 years ago.
Was that the end of the TV show? Like, did they make it? Like, how long did the TV show run? Like 4 or 5 years?
It ran, I think, until I want to say like 97, 98. Then it like that whole people I just think didn't want it anymore, or grew out of it, or it changed. Then they brought it back in like 2011. Like, and then again it went for a couple seasons, and then he did it again for like Paramount and like brought it back, and that's when I think you have the newer kind of.
You had
series, but
93 to 97, then it came back 2011 for a season, then it came back 2022. So
I just pulled it up on Paramount. I'm like, how are there like 11 seasons of this show? It's crazy.
That does seem excessive.
It's cool that they made a movie during the height of it, though.
Sure.
I think because you mentioned the Simpsons movie earlier, and I think it's such an alternate reality. Like a shame for me is like, I don't know if you guys still watch The Simpsons. The Simpsons was unbeatable in the early 90s for like a 7-8 year window. It was the best thing.
6-7 seasons are iconic.
It's iconic. And then they made a movie like 10 years later when it was like past unwatchable for me. Like even like South Park, I think they made their movie like between seasons 2 and season 3 when it was like the height. Like they were so new, and the voice is so good. So it's cool that Beavis and Butthead got to have like this encapsulation of when it was still like at its height before people were kind of over it already.
I always forget that South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut came out in 1999, the same year that nothing else came out.
Famously dead year for movies.
No movies.
That's
exactly.
That was the movie that I met my now wife, and we were sitting like, this is literally one of our very first dates.
You bonded over your love of Saddam Hussein. That's right.
but yeah, because
did the Spider-Man point? You're like, you too.
I mentioned South Park, and I go, all right, here we go. This is where this sort of classy Texas lady is going to say South Park's stupid, and she goes, oh, I love South Park, but she'd only seen the movie. She'd never seen an episode. Her introduction to South Park was the movie, and she thought it was funny, and that's when I go, all right, this girl's cool.
This is good.
South Park is like another like pocketed thing for me. Like I was at that age. I remember being on AOL and getting the bootleg copy of the Christmas episode, and you're like, oh my god, they swear in cartoons, like it's this crazy shit. And then it just exploded into the show. But I got to a point where I'm like, same thing with Family Guy. I was really into it, and then I just kind of petered out. I'm like, no pun intended, but it's just like,
But it's funny. Everything you guys are talking about, the Beavis and Butthead. I'm just like that. South Park, like that was me like 4 or 5 years later. Because like for me, like I wasn't old enough to watch the movie in theaters, and my parents were going to bring me to that. But I could for some reason buy the CD. So like I got to listen to the CD and all the foul language and the songs through that before I saw the movie. And it sounds like, not as iconic as probably the Beavis and Butthead soundtrack was, but
it's iconic in a different way, because I don't see any Uncle Fucker on the Beavis and Butthead.
Beavis and Butthead wasn't a kind of an opera or a musical.
It was like, that's the thing too, is Beavis and Butthead was very like intrinsically tied to MTV. Like that was kind of how do we get these kids to listen to music? Oh, well, shoehorn a fucking cartoon into it and make them talk shit about these music videos.
Mhm.
Which is kind of why I don't think the new stuff works as well, because MTV's just gone. And
Mhm.
so you don't have that same like tie to the music industry
Yeah.
that Beavis
They're
and
not. They're
Butthead
not
did.
watching like Date My Mom or something. They're not. They're not
I
watching.
think they do. Like, that's so funny.
Well,
you
I'm
say
watching
like,
that, but that's my own show.
Right.
But
MILF
that's none of
Islands?
your damn business.
Yeah. But I think they are like on some of those more recent episodes. I don't know how they handle like the rights with streaming it, if they can still show like old music videos. I don't know how that works, but I feel like I remember the newer ones, they aren't just watching music videos. They are watching like modern content. Like they
Like
might be
viral
watching
clips.
something,
Yeah.
which again,
Ugh.
like I never connected with the music video aspect part of it. I know that's such an important piece of what Beavis and Butthead are, but that for me was the weak link. Like I liked their just ridiculous antics. I like Beavis, like I like them beating the shit out of each other and hitting each other with bats playing frog baseball. That's just
I think with this movie, I think Adam, you've kind of like sort of you hit the nail on the head really about it is very much of its time. It is very 90s, and like you're right about like it came out at a time when we were wanting it. But I can also understand like because for me, like I said at the very beginning, it took me back.
Yeah.
You know, it unlocked that core memory. It made me a
Same.
teenager again. I remember
Oh, yeah.
watching it with my friends and my brothers. And so like for me, it was a bit more of a nostalgia trip
Totally.
necessarily. So that's why I like the fact that you're like, yeah, it just didn't work for me because you were coming in sort of blind.
For
And
sure.
everyone else, because Ryan and Will, we'd all seen it. Yeah, this is one that
Oh,
we'd all
yeah.
seen before.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
there you go. So it's almost
Remember I
like
ditched my dad?
But I did see it when I was a kid. But it was like already. I think I already had been out for a few years, and I caught it on when I was replaying or something. But you're totally right. There are those movies where it's like this is a dose of nostalgia. You might hate it, but this just hit me, and it's intrinsically tied to like a moment in my life. It reminds me of where I was and where I was and all those things. So, and so I'm glad that you guys are speaking to that because I was like, I'm sure that's what it is. So that makes sense.
Yeah, no one is like
Whereas-
scrolling through Paramount Plus and stumbling across this movie who's never seen it before and is like, oh, I'll check this out, unless you're doing a road trip podcast.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, right. So while it may be very much a product of its time, I would say that the other two movies that we've got on here, they enter into the timeless nature. So let's move on over. Let's talk about Ridley Scott's Thelma and Louise. 1991, Susan Sarandon, Gina Davis, Harvey Keitel, a very young, skinny Brad Pitt, Michael Madsen, and Shooter McGavin, Chris
And a
McDonald.
super hot Stephen Tobolowsky.
Yeah. But like, I want to immediately just jump into Ryan, because Ryan on the text thread, you were a little bit, Thelma and Louise, I didn't care for it.
I know, it was just, that's the thing, like, much like you were saying, like, I didn't grow up with this movie, and I already, like, I had this preconceived notion going into it. I also thought that, I forgot it was Gina Davis, and for some reason thought it was someone else in it. I thought it was Julia Roberts for some weird reason. I also thought that Tony Scott directed this movie. I was a mess. I'm all
It
over
looks
does
like Tony
sound
Scott
like a
directed
Tony
it.
Scott,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Yeah.
and it does look like it's sometimes, but and I think I was just expecting more out of it, like more road trip. Like I already knew how it was going to end, so that kind of like
Right.
like, but in my
Removes
mind
that.
watching this, I'm like, did Susan Sarandon, like, was she preparing to kill herself this whole time, or what?
It's a interesting point because you'd said that, and I went in with a little bit of trepidation to watching this, and then it started, and I'm watching it, I go, no, Ryan's wrong. This movie.
No, and I did like it, but I think I was just expecting.
You don't like women. We get it.
Yeah.
You're not a
It's
feminist.
on the
Okay.
record.
So you have listened to our podcast. I was worried there for a second.
I thought this movie, like,
I don't like powerful women.
I remember seeing this again, sort of like around, it came out in 91, so I think I saw it on VHS when I was about 14, 15, being very aware of it and feeling kind of like, oh, I want to see it, and feeling kind of grown up. But it was watching it, but like, I remember it just being like, I remember it being good, but going back and watching it, I still think I really enjoyed this. I think it's got such an eye for America. It really does give you the road trip feel. Like it's a lot of, much like Midnight Run, a lot of location work. You know,
Yeah.
even when they're sort of like they're inside a hotel room, you've got that door, the door open in the background. You can see the highway through there, and it's like there's no one's doing this on a soundstage, which I think adds very much kind of to the realism. It's kind of this thing that we talked about before, is that sometimes foreign directors do America better than Americans do. Because it's like they sort of like think like Roland Emmerich and Independence Day and The Patriot and things like think of Paul Verhoeven with
Interesting,
RoboCop and like
sure.
you know and Starship Troopers, and then Ridley Scott. You know, this is like, I'm amazed there's not more American flags and eagles. You know,
now you
like
say grounded realism, but there's a lot of insane shit that happens in this movie. Like when they blow up a tanker or
that was awesome.
Well, I think the most unrealistic
Kick-ass.
part of the
Yeah, it
movie
was
is they
awesome.
keep bumping into this guy.
that's
It's
crazy.
like,
Yeah.
like he's
Yeah.
always on the same back road.
And
we
that
are.
they caught Brad Pitt. Like it was like I
didn't understand when they found Brad Pitt again. It's like he went
Again,
down
like-
with this random road to escape the police, and he's like, "Oh, here you are."
Yeah. That
I
was
mean,
the
my
bit that-
theory is there are multiple hot Brad Pitts throughout the Southwest.
Well, I
and
mean,
I wish.
Yeah, right? We'd be a better country if that were true. But yeah, this serendipity of them stumbling upon him again, and then like there's just I again like had this preconceived notion about this movie, and as I'm watching, I'm like, this seems a little insane. Like
speaking of, we've done our favorite thing we do on the podcast, talking about a movie without mentioning what the movie is about, just in case you haven't seen Thelma and Louise. It's Susan Sarandon, Gina Davis, two Arkansas sort of housewives, or well, just, you know, ladies, that decide to go off on a girls' trip that quickly escalates. They end up in a roadhouse, I believe still in Arkansas, where Gina Davis's character, Thelma, right? She almost gets raped, and Louise comes by and murders the dude. I mean, honestly, you want him to be shot by that point, because he will not shut up. I mean, just at this point, I'm like, yeah, no, blow this guy away. He sucks. But it just is the incident that just from that point on, things do just get crazy and get crazier and crazier until the point that they just kind of come alive, but to the point that they've like, it's almost like Gina Davis even says it in the movie, I don't think I've ever been so awake in my life. But they get to that point of being so awake that they're like, all right, well, I don't want to go back to my life. Let's just
guess we'll die.
Yeah, I guess.
Fucking, it's crazy. It's so crazy to me. Like, I love that she, not to get, you know, to jump around to the end, but she like, they just hold hands. She's like, okay, let's fucking go. Just go.
It's
Like,
it's
iconic.
It fucking works. It's
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
Like that's why the movie is so great, because there are those iconic moments, and it is hyper stylized, but man, you guys are hitting on so many great things. Like the scenery is so good. Like I remember there was a moment where like the things that you can't fake, like they were at a motel near the beginning and the windows are open and you see like the highway outside and the dirt road. I was like, this movie just looks beautiful. Like it just feels real. Like they just found this place in the middle of nowhere.
One bad shot though, and I was laughing at it, and then Will, you sent it, I believe, to our text.
Oh no!
It's just the wait, what? Because they're driving through Monument Valley at night,
right? And they
lighting
put
the biggest, just like massive light hidden behind.
I had to ask. I'm like,
the whole
is that
lit up?
I was like, but in my mind, because I've never driven through that like ever, let alone at night. I'm like, maybe they do that. Like maybe they light it up at night. I don't know.
Maybe they've got a 65,000 watt halogen.
Suspension of disbelief, my friend.
I don't know.
I didn't even notice it.
Yeah. But it looked like a comic book. Like it was just that was like so unnatural, but still so fucking
So
cool.
that's the thing. That's the reason it stuck out to me, is because like just like Adam was saying, in every other case, it looks like they've just plonked a camera down, like on the side of the road, inside the hotel, you know, on the side of a car. It's just like it's a sweaty, dirty, dusty shoot.
Yeah.
You know, but that's what it feels like. It's just you feel like you're in the car on the road trip.
Yeah.
You know, it's just you can almost smell it. It's brilliant.
You get all like, I love all of the side characters too. That like you get when Louise they get pulled over. Louise gets arrested, and they kidnap the cop and throw him in the trunk of the car. And then you get the cyclist who comes along smoking a fucking joint with
blows
his like
it into the
with his Walkman on his shoulder.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's so fucking cool. I'm like people who are cyclists like still wear this outfit. It's incredible. But he blows this
that guy looked like he
I couldn't believe when he did that. I was like,
yeah,
it's crazy. Yeah. I was like, fuck yeah.
I loved
dude.
it. And never see him again.
No.
Never hear from him. Like there was no, we didn't need to introduce him, give him any motivation. No, it's a dude smoking.
Technically, you don't see what happens to Thelma and Louise after they drive off the cliff, so I have to assume they're going to do like some sort of legacy sequel. Right?
Yeah.
I hope so.
They like land on the top of a blimp and they just float away. And
So it's like,
There
so
we
as I
go.
sort of mentioned earlier, so it's very much regarded as a sort of a legendary sort of piece of feminist cinema, which is these sort of like these women kind of discovering themselves and sort of like, and the men in the movie that you know, only Harvey Keitel seems to be kind of like wanting to help. You know, him
he
kind
just
of,
really wants to bang Susan Sarandon. It seems
Well,
like
who
super into
doesn't?
her.
But like, but you look at sort of, you know, Christopher McDonald, Gina Davis's sort of like husband is, he just plays such a great
Oh my
sort of
God.
douchebag.
Yeah.
It's not like he's just a shitty husband. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like he's like
That was my
beating-
first note. My first note on this was Christopher McDonald is a treasure because
Yeah.
he
Oh, yeah.
is
Yeah.
he's amazing in the
Oh.
movie.
In everything, I think the last film we did was Utah, and seeing him pop up in SLC Punk
SLC
is like
Punk.
yeah,
Right.
but playing like really against type and being this supportive, caring role, because you really never see that from Shooter McGavin himself.
He has that natural kind of charisma of just like this kind of wild guy. But you're right, all the men and you definitely see it's the difference of like when you have a director. I mean, obviously the script is amazing and and the writer was doing these things, and then when you have a director like Ridley Scott with such a vision. And I didn't think about what you said, Ollie, about like even an outsider from America getting to put their kind of spin on Americana and what that looks like. That makes it very unique. Because then I think you're ditching reality to a certain extent for this stylized and these things that maybe shouldn't work, maybe on the page or by themselves, just do. Chalk it up to like movie magic, but it all works. It all feels like magic in this kind of not wasteland. It's not a wasteland, but there's like these desert plains where you know you can run into anybody or the same person on the road, or you're coming across these
It's
oil
this
derricks.
mysticism, you know, like
this
this
mysticism,
whimsy to it. There's just
It's
something
the-
about that. The
It's
desert.
also the iconography of just the uniquely American sort of like, you know, countryside. And like that's the thing that this movie does very, very well. Is it, you know, that's why it's kind of like, I think that's why I brought it up regarding Ridley Scott, but it's for me too, is like, you know, in England you've got the rolling sort of green hills and stuff. You don't have these massive pieces of rock or these huge open deserts or just dirt roads that just go off into the distance. You're like, where does that go kind of vibe? That it kind of like it was giving us very much like, you know, rolling into these tiny little sort of one stop like towns, you know, to fill up and things like that.
Yeah, when
So
she
like,
robs the like when she takes all her jewelry off and gives it to the guy, or when Gina
Right.
Davis like
Great scene.
inevitably robs the convenience store with everything she learned from Brad Pitt, which is such a great little callback. Like
yeah, that was actually a really good scene. And then you've got Christopher McDonald watching the video, just like, who the hell, what the hell?
yeah, just rock hard. Yeah. You have these
Who's this woman?
these FBI agents just living in his house.
Yeah.
And he's standing there, they're watching. I wish I knew what movie they
That
were
old
watching.
movie,
where
yeah.
he changes the channel to the sports thing. Like all
Everyone's
turn
like, what are you
around,
doing?
like,
God,
So like,
I think
I mean, Brad Pitt's another perfect example. Like, you know, yeah, fine. He comes by and he gives Gina Davis the fucking that she's desperately been needing, apparently.
Yeah.
But then also robs them of all their money. And it's like, I was, again, joking with the missus
God.
this morning, is all it takes is to get properly laid by Brad Pitt, and you're like, I can die happy now. I'm good.
I mean, he looked incredible in this movie. You know, when Susan Sarandon's in the cafe and Gina Davis like saunters in like she's just been fucked. It's great.
Yeah.
And she's like, where's the money? And I'm like, oh, God damn it. What are you doing? You left
Yeah,
him in there, but she's,
I know.
oh God. And you knew it was coming. You
Well,
knew it was
Thelma-
coming, but
got that-
I honestly, I didn't expect him to be caught and that to be like
Yeah.
another inciting thing. I thought it was just another
He would just be
hurdle
like
for him to
dust in the
jump through.
wind, just like get
Yeah,
away with
like,
it, you know.
yeah.
And it's kind of like the interesting part as well is that the Harvey Keitel, I in my head remembered him chasing along, but no, the whole movie he's in Arkansas, just kind of following the journey and like learning more about the motivations of why Louise or Thelma are doing this, and then like you said, living with Christopher McDonald. It's because only at the end does he get that close to them, you know, when he's trying to keep them alive. But that was what I think it's quite interesting, because in any other movie it would be, and much like in Midnight Run, you've always got the dog yapping at their heels. But it's like Harvey Keitel being such a main character, he's just actually 3 states away from them almost the entire time. And I'm like, oh, that's,
Yeah.
and it
It's like you
works.
expect him to be smoking a cigarette going like, these guys are good, or these
Yeah.
gals are good. You know, like just enamored by them, like constantly being miraculously a few steps ahead, even though they're driving. And again, I get it's the 90s, but they're driving a very recognizable vehicle. It's like this, even she even says, she's like, I really wish it wasn't a green car.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean the performances from both of them in this movie are just like next level good. I gotta say, I think like horny ditzy Gina Davis is probably like my favorite version of Gina Davis. She was just, I was like enamored with her the entire movie.
She's
I'm like,
great.
I could watch 10 movies with her like
They're
this.
so great together. Like
They are. And they didn't have to go. We love, I think, I guess Beavis and Butthead are pretty similar, but Midnight Run works when we get to that because of like the dynamic and how they're like this kind of their differences. But in this one, they're such like good friends. And when one's usually there's always like what makes it different is like usually when one's down, the other one kind of picks them up and they kind of do that thing. And then you have the Gina Davis's character arc is freaking fantastic from this like housewife to the straight badass at the end.
I do kind of wish you get like a little bit of them in the wilderness. Like the original plan was just to go to the woods or like and go fishing. Like, I'd love to see that. That sounds lovely.
Well, it's something I did make me sort of giggle a little bit because it was very on the nose. But you get to about the halfway point onwards, and kind of like you were saying, you know, with you can see the arc physically manifested in the way that they dress, the way that they do their hair. So instead of being so buttoned up, now they're getting casual and stuff like that. But they also, you can quite, especially with Susan Sarandon because she's a very blessed woman, but stop wearing bras. You know, as in like, damn the patriarchy, like quite literally, you know, burning the bras. We're just doing it and going ahead. And I go, all right, it's you see it, you know, physically manifest, you see it visually manifest, you go on this journey with them to, you know, at the same time that, and I'm with you, that the ending for me, I think it works. I mean, it's like, I remember being quite shocked by it because I saw it as a kid without knowing how it was going to end. I'm like, oh shit.
It's one of the most iconic film endings ever, you know. It's so much that it's parodied. Like, I think I went through a list of all the parodies. There was even one back in the day, TBS used to run these ads of like these pastiches of films, but they're all using chimpanzees, which I don't really co-sign with, but I sent it to the group chat.
Oh wow, I didn't see this.
Fucking insane. And they did this one with Thelma Louise, but there were 2 chimpanzees. It's great.
Yeah,
and they actually killed the chimpanzee. It was they were committed to the bit.
So what about you, Will? Like, you know, I'm looking, you sometimes Will comes in with these scalding hot takes, you know, like what was your vibe here at Thelma Louise? You know, how did you enjoy it?
I mean, my take's gonna be pretty cold. I loved it. I'm not gonna be, I don't have anything wild to say.
You had seen it though, right?
I thought I had. Because it's one of those things. It's been so large in culture. I was like, oh, I've seen it, right? And then like 10 minutes into this movie, I'm like, I'm not recognizing any scenes. I have not seen this.
You just seen the most recent movie, Thelma.
Yes, that's the prequel. But I loved it. I mean, it's just a story of like 2 women who get cooler and cooler as the movie goes on. You know, it's
Women Be Crazy, the movie.
I was shocked it was Ridley Scott because it totally feels like a Tony Scott movie.
It does.
But yeah, no, I loved everybody's performances were great. The only thing I thought was weird was the editing was a little strange to me because it felt like scenes would cut away. Like Harvey Keitel would be talking to somebody, and it seemed like scenes would cut away like a moment or two too soon. And that kind of continued throughout the movie. Not enough to be like distracting or even that it was bad. It was just something I clocked where I'm like, wow, it's like Harvey Keitel asks somebody a question and then it like cuts immediately. And I'm like, oh.
So they were just trying to shave seconds because it was like it's over a 2-hour movie.
That's the only thing I could think of is maybe
I think I noticed that once or
longer.
twice when it's like, oh, it felt like they just like cut up in the middle of a sentence and it's like hard cut to something else. So I always kind of chalk it up to I wonder what they were trying to like evoke with that. Like I didn't catch it, but they're trying to do something.
I didn't even notice.
This is one of those movies, man, where when I was done, I was like talking to my wife. I was like, you would fucking love this movie because this movie again, man, this Ridley Scott also like, how did this work? Because it's also such a feminist movie, and this movie is female rage. Right. That's what the movie is, and I'm sure people, especially a lot of women, were eating it up. Maybe in the '90s when I don't know. I was a kid in the '90s, so I don't know what was going on in mainstream. But like, yeah, this because like every man in the movie, maybe besides Harvey Keitel, but every man is either like aggressive or dumb or backstabbing or
Yeah.
demeaning or
You're right.
threatening. But they're
Yeah.
even Harvey Keitel falls into all men are like some authority figures over
Mhm.
these two women.
Mhm.
I think there's one shot I wish he would have removed where there was one female police officer. I was kind of wishing that was out of there because otherwise it was like across
Yeah.
the board,
Yeah.
every authority figure was a man.
Yeah, because even the waitress at the bar is like super helpful to them,
Yeah.
like takes their side.
The
Like, no,
only
he's in-
women
yeah.
are
Yeah.
waiters. I think
Yeah.
then there's the one about when after she had sex with Brad Pitt's character. I think there's no, it's when she's kissing goodbye to
Michael Madsen.
what's his
Oh,
name?
Michael Madsen, yeah.
Thank you. And she's like, oh, it was getting steamy in here. Like
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
only women. And then there's one shot, if you guys remember, I'm sure it was a little heavy-handed, but it worked for me. Where I think they're getting in. Oh, it's when Gina Davis is robbing the gas station, and Susan Sarandon is just in the car looking around, and she sees like two older women like in
Yeah.
the window, just
Yeah.
kind of
That was great.
cut in. You're like, damn, like
She goes to
that's
put
what's
her
cool when you
lipstick
have a
on.
director who's on another level. Like
Yeah.
he's
Mhm.
telling a deeper story. It's not just surface level wacky whatever. It's like he's also telling, and again, it's the female writer also certainly earning her Oscar. They're telling something deeper that makes it stand the test of time.
You get a similar thing we talk about like when we did Point Break, like how Catherine Bigelow, a woman, better captures the feeling of these men than a male
That's so
director.
cool.
Yeah,
You know,
and
like-
it's shooting men for the female gaze as
Mhm.
well. But
Totally.
then, like, you know, but when we're
Not the
doing-
female gaze, the female.
yeah.
Yeah, those are called lesbians, Ollie.
but even to the point that as guys we're looking at going, man, Patrick Swayze's gorgeous, you know, like,
Yeah.
and like, oh man, like it's just,
Yeah.
you can just, it shows how, you know, it can work. And like you were saying, is like try and get in the mindset of the early 90s. Oh, a movie, two women, acting out, shooting action. It's like, oh, we've never seen anything like this before, because you're coming out of just the most macho decade in movies ever, the 80s. It's just not Sylvester Stallone and like Arnold, just massive muscles and grease and machine guns and everything else. And in this case, it's kind of like vulnerable women, and like you said, that sort of women that have done that, they've had enough. They're putting their foot down. They're doing it for themselves. They're gonna kill someone that mouths off to them. And it's like, and then you also have that kind of undercurrent which never really fully gets addressed. But whatever happened to Louise in Texas? You know,
they finally drop it at the end. I think.
Yeah.
I think
Bit of
Harvey Keitel kind
context.
of hits it. Yeah.
But like he goes, I know what happened to you. But it's like, but it informs all of Susan Sarandon's choices.
Right.
You know, and it's like her acting in the way that she sort of does that. And sometimes it's just in the silence of her performance or the steely look. And, you know, and then also I sort of kind of having to deal with that. Thelma so often is just kind of a bumbling Muppet that there's so many situations in this thing where, oh, Thelma, come on, man.
God, yeah. That's why I'm like wondering what was her motivation from the start? Because I mean, the movie opens with her calling it's Thelma or Louise, which one?
Louise is Susan Sarandon.
Okay, so she's calling Thelma like at home. She's at work, like, but the way she like cleans her apartment, like she knows she's never coming back here. But what is her plan with bringing her in, like to go on this road trip?
It's interesting you bring that up because that was something I noticed too. That I was like
she's got the one glass, like it's pristine.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, so it's the bit where she's packed up, and then you see it's just the shot lingers on her apartment for just a beat, but you realize. So is it trying to tell me, okay, she lives alone? Is it trying to tell me that she lives very simply? I get your read on it, Ryan. I didn't take it that way, but I understand why you did. Is it her going, I'm never coming back?
That's because even when Harvey Keitel just loosely lets himself into her apartment, like to look at it, like he runs his finger, like the place has like been wiped clean. Like she's never, like her intention is to never go back there.
I like that take.
But which is fine. But then her bringing Thelma? Like was she gonna kill her?
It's because she knows that Thelma is fundamentally unhappy with her life. She's got a shitty husband, and it's almost like I think like Louise is just trying to almost show her what the world can be.
But then is she gonna like drop her off and then go to Mexico and then kill herself? Like what? Like what was her
interesting? I don't know if I picked up on that. That's interesting though. But it seems like we find out after the fact. It sounds like she had a decent relationship with Michael Madsen. Like, seems like they genuinely were like in love, even in spite of him still like raging and throwing a table. And but then she calls him out on his shit and he apologizes. and like proposes basically. It's like, yeah.
There is that other part though, where you can tell that she's kind of unsure about how far she's going to commit to this, and she's on the phone with him. She goes, like, "Do you love me?" And he's like, yeah, you know. And it's such an obviously not a yes of like, "I love you," that you see and she kind of like deflates afterwards because she goes, "I guess I'm on," because I guess what she was looking for is someone to tell her to stop. And that's not what she doesn't get that, and she's like, "All right, I guess we're on this path now." But like that was another, like, just like I said, all the acting of it. That's why I didn't realize until very recently that they were both nominated for Best Actress. So they
I didn't realize that.
they
Cool.
both got Best
That's
Actress,
cool.
and instead of one of them being the supporting, they're like, no. I mean, they both lost, which sucks, but like both of them getting nominated for Best Actress, I think that just kind of gives you an indication. It also got Best Director, Best Screenplay, Cinematographer, Editing. So it got
It's an incredible film. Incredible.
a number of awards. You know, it was a big deal of a movie. And then also,
I
like, it
I love the
played
bit
well.
where they have her, they call her husband to see if the phone is tapped.
Yes.
Oh, and
And
as soon as he answers,
He's like, "Hey!" And she's like,
It's tapped. They're listening.
that part was that was great. That was
Thelma calls
great.
back and she's like, "Your foster parents are dead."
Yeah.
That was such a great little bit. Like, and she calls back. She's like, "Let me talk to the FBI." I know he's
that
there.
was
Come on, like,
So good.
yeah.
Yeah, because every other time we've ever heard him on the phone, he's all like, "Thelma!" You know, he's
Yeah,
always like
just
just
a
angry and
dick,
screaming.
yeah.
So he answers the phone so nice and just immediately hangs up.
Oh,
That
I forgot. That was funny.
that shot in the beginning too, after the inciting incident, when she first calls home and it's like 4 a.m. and it's just the close up of the microwave with the beer. I'm like, you know that beer is warm as hell. Why would he drink that shit? Like, how could you think leaving that out? Like, even if you're gone for an hour, it's not warm.
But that's the thing, and so what are we reading into that? You know, is that
women? Am I right?
Yeah.
Man, you really hate women. Gosh,
No.
That's not the voice of Adam saying.
No.
But very much kind of like we were saying about like Ridley Scott, is he can tell a story, like, you know, instead of it, you know, cutting to him sleeping with some other woman, it's
you don't need it. Yeah.
Linger on the shot of the microwave. You see it's 4 o'clock in the morning and he's not there. Yeah. And it's like it tells you everything you need to know about their marriage without explicitly having to spell it out for you.
And it's perfect casting. Like, you didn't need any of that because it's Christopher McDonald. Like, it's just from the beginning you see him. He's just did they ever say like what it is that he does?
He's
like,
a
what his job is?
salesman.
Oh. Okay, but he drives a fucking Corvette. He's got a Rolex. It's great. Just a fucking gigantic piece.
The 90s.
Yeah, different time.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's got like the hair and the chain. Like, it's great. Like, perfect casting. Perfect.
Stepping on his pizza.
Yeah. But that's again, that's really, I like that as well, is that the set dressing of you know, she's gone for a couple of days and his house just becomes
falls
a disaster
apart,
and there's empty beer bottles everywhere, and it's like I said, there's a lot to this movie, and like, you know, and I like that there's a lot of show don't tell, and I like that it builds and builds and the tension builds, and we end up with like a pretty legit kind of like car chase, and it's been, you know,
massive.
Like, you know, between this and Midnight Run, we took out a lot of police cars. There was like, you know, it was almost like a Blues Brothers level of like,
very destructive. All this, like, because you look back, like, granted, they did terrible things, but I mean, they weren't like,
but they're hot, so it's okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, but I guess that's what I'm saying from the beginning, is like, I thought this went a different way. Like, you expect them to go on like this really insane Bonnie and Clyde style like crime spree, but that's not really what happens. Like, yeah, they kill the guy in defense, you know, then they lose their money, then she robs a convenience store, and that's kind of it. Like, sure, they blow up that gas tanker, but
I made a note of that, where in spite of these things they do, well, they're always super charming, but you feel like a justification for everything they're doing, whether it's like rebelling or defense, or they were just robbed themselves. Like, they always do a good job of like, because I'm sure as an audience you're wondering like, or the fear when you're writing it is like, why don't they just give up? Why don't they go home? Why don't they stop? Why do they keep going? And they always kind of answered those. They kept going, and all these things. Yeah, it felt like an underdog story. So it was very,
you're rooting for them the whole time.
Root for them,
yeah. But there's that bit, and like even Harvey Keitel spells it out when he's slapping around Brad Pitt. But he's like, they had a chance until you robbed them, and now you've now put them into a position where it's escalated too far. and this
Yeah.
is only going to end one way. And from that one point on, it's his mission is to try and keep them alive.
Yeah. And
but
Brad
it's
Pitt
a-
does not give a shit. Like another terrible fucking man in this movie. But goddamn, is he hot?
Yeah, and then even there's a bit where he goes like, "I liked your wife," you know, like
Dude,
just-
I mean, come on.
That was
Like,
great.
Come on.
That
Like,
was
why would
great.
you bring him there? Like, what the
Yeah.
fuck?
There is something good about, like, again, it's like they never crossed the line. Like they never seemed like bad people. Like even like putting the cop in his trunk, it's like they could have gone really bad. They could have gone really south. I'm so glad they didn't do that. I'm so glad it wasn't one of those, because we've seen those movies too, where it's like, oh no, my gun went off and accidentally shot someone, and now I'm terrible. Now you're like, well, now it's hard to root for you, or like they never seem to cross that line for the audience.
And they're always being polite as well, even when they're
always
robbing.
being polite.
Gina Davis is robbing, but when they put the guy in the back, and we're really sorry, sir. Thank you very much. You know, but, like,
God,
they're very innocent and like naive in ways.
Question, because Brad Pitt's he took what, like it was like $6,800, something like that, like $7,000, right?
67.
How much money could she have possibly taken from this tiny convenience store in the middle of nowhere? How much cash could they have gotten?
It was a couple of hundred, but again,
Couple
the
hundred,
ni-
probably.
the
I know,
90s,
it's
that's
like-
enough for 3 weeks.
It's like 4 Bitcoin. I guess, yeah. But that was devastating. Like when he takes the money, I'm like, they have
No, I didn't see that
nothing.
coming. I was like, damn it. Because you think like this is finally a good guy. Yeah, that was a gut punch.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit as well. Like we were mentioning it, there are some beautiful shots. Like when I was talking about that one shot that really sort of sticks in my mind is when it's towards the end. It's a big canyon. The cars on top, and then you
it's on
get
the
this
side,
looming
yeah.
helicopter, sort of like stalking them at the bottom. And I'm like, just seeing that. You know, you could, if I was the guy behind the camera, go, oh yeah, we got it. That's a shot right there, because it was a beaut, that one. But like all through it, there was some
shots.
Even the shot we talked about that felt unreal. Like, but that shot of Utah where they're driving at night and you get the monuments lit up, it's as unrealistic as it is. It looked so fucking cool.
Yeah.
I was looking up. So the guy, the cinematographer, Adrian Biddle, and I go, oh man, like he's good. I mean, he's been with, he was a clapper loader on The Duelists, which is one of Ridley Scott's very first, I think it's his first feature. But he was cinematographer on Aliens, Princess Bride, Willow, Thelma Louise, City Slickers 2.
All right.
Personal favorite.
One good one, finally.
Event Horizon, the Mummy, you know, V for
Oh,
Vendetta.
Event Horizon? Yeah, that makes sense.
So this guy, he's shot some really, really good movies. He's got a great eye, but he's British as well. So you've got a British cinematographer, British director, but like they've captured, it's almost like a big old postcard of the American Southwest.
I still can't get over how much this like looked and felt like an early Tony Scott movie. Maybe not like 10 camera Tony, like the frenetic nature of it, but it had like, especially like right at the beginning, right after the incident happens, where it's night and it's raining and she pulls under the overpass, like that, those night scenes.
The way the car skids out
They
is very
do this.
Tony Scott.
My favorite thing in movies where the car's driving at night and there's so clearly like 2 spotlights on the dashboard, like illuminating them.
Oh yeah.
That's so great. It looked so good.
Yeah, because it's got the whole, you know, Beverly Hills Cop 2 and Top Gun vibe,
Yeah.
Setting Sun sort of like vibe, and I think that's probably being helped by, again, the red rocks of the American Southwest and things like that. This movie, like I said, got nominated for a number of awards. The thing is, it's such an iconic movie, and then we get into the box office, and it's like it made $45 million, which back then is a lot of money, but like by today's standard, it'd be $450 million for it to be a success. You know what I mean? It's wild.
It's wild to think now how movies, if you don't have like $100 million budget, it's the craziest thing. Like I think you look back, like Alien looked like that, and it had what, a $14 million budget. It was like nothing.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I like A24, and that's why I like, look, I mean, Godzilla Minus One was a $15 million movie, you know, that looked better and was better in every way than the King Kong Godzilla latest crossover, which, don't worry, I've got a soft spot. For me, King of the Monsters was the absolute peak of that monsterverse, but that latest one was an absolute abortion of a movie.
Well, it's like people, they're like Hollywood or whatever studios, maybe they're figuring out or maybe they're not, but you can't just throw money like throwing money at a movie does not equal like it's good. Like this cost $250 million to make. It's got to be good. It's like, no, not if it's all just green screens and the money's not going to the right places. Yeah, so many of those, like, I feel like I love the movies that do more with less, because you're being more creative. There's more practical things. You're shooting on location. It just looks real and it
That's what I
feels
say.
real.
I think when you look at some of the stories behind some of the classic movies of all time, they've had these troubled productions or these problems or these situations. And I think when you are backed into a corner, the best creativity and the best solutions come out, as opposed to when you've got carte blanche and $250 million
Totally.
and you can do whatever you want. You're not being challenged. You're not, look at Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like for what they had budget wise and what they were able to sort of like realize, because they're limited, they're getting inventive, they're doing it in camera. And it's got all the production value you need. So I'm like with you.
It's an original movie too. It's not like you're handcuffed to a franchise or a legacy or anything like that.
Well, I think that's one of the sad things too, that I think that made it probably stand out. We all know, sadly, that when women get above like 35, they kind of just like die and they don't really exist on. I mean, I think that's starting to change now, which is cool. But I'm sure a lot of people, like you said, coming out of the macho 80s action movies, I'm sure people were like, I don't want to go see two chicks, drive around. I don't know what this movie is. And what I mean? Like there is that kind of
for sure
sexism, unfortunately, I'm sure at the time. And again, I think things are way better now. But this was like probably why it was so cutting edge. Like this is like just two women by themselves carrying this whole thing. And
you're right.
And they didn't ever stoop to the whole, all right, to get the guys in, all right, let's get them topless in a scene.
Yeah, totally.
It's all just straight up. No, women
famously, like Ridley Scott wanted Gina Davis to do a topless scene in this.
Oh, really?
She didn't want to do it. And then she mentioned that to Susan Sarandon, and then Susan Sarandon went to talk to Ridley, and she's like, she's not fucking doing this. And he's like, okay.
But he's like, we'll make Brad Pitt be topless.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Naked Brad Pitt, but that's all they needed. All in all, I think this was fantastic. I thought it was a fantastic movie.
Incredible.
You're welcome.
It's it's got that great, like I was saying, that Hans Zimmer sort of like guitar score kind of thing was just. I remember as soon as it kicked in, it just took me back to, oh, that's right. I remember like just absolutely digging it.
It's a movie I wish I would have seen younger to have a different appreciation for it. But because I'm watching it, in this modern age with fresh eyes, it didn't resonate with me as much as it would have had I seen it years ago. But that said,
I almost feel the opposite, because I feel like if I was like a horny 13-year-old watching this, I probably wouldn't be appreciating it for. You need more context that comes with like age and experience.
That's fair. Yeah, you're right.
So somewhere in between you and me, because I agree with you too. But yeah.
Oh, this is interesting. Okay, random. So JD, I believe, is Brad Pitt's character, right? Gina Davis happened to be seated next to George Clooney on a flight 20 years after the movie's release, and while randomly chatting, George Clooney was like he actually cast for that role but didn't get it. That's just interesting. Interesting. I wonder George Clooney in that role. I can see that. I can see George.
Because Brad Pitt was just eating the whole time.
Yeah, we didn't get to
we didn't get Brad Pitt eating in this. Yeah.
Yeah. Not the only thing he was eating was Gina Davis.
Yeah.
On that note, we'll let's get over to the movie I've honestly been wanting to talk about since we started. Let's move on over to 1988's Midnight Run. A movie that has left me like feeling like giddy, like floating. It's just, when you watch an absolutely perfect
It's
movie.
A perfect movie.
We've had a few of those on the podcast when it's just like, no notes at all. Yeah. It's evoking something that I'm really enjoying. Everyone is on fire in this movie. I mean, everybody is killing it in this movie. Let's start with you, Adam. I wanna get your take. I wanna how was your vibe, your feel, your read, just your everything on this movie? I'm fascinated.
You know what it's when you come into certain movies, and again, I've heard about this when it's always mentioned in these top lists, and so it's hard to be like, oh man, expectations are kind of high. I hope I like it, and it's so satisfying when you come into a movie and it meets those expectations, if not exceeds them. The movie was a damn delight. I don't think it dragged ever. It was, again, with road trip movies, it's kind of baked in that it's always, we're jumping here, we're jumping here, we're jumping here. I think one note before I send it to you guys, Robert De Niro, obviously I think we know different like aspects of his career, where there's like 70s De Niro when he was getting nominated, and even like early 80s, who's like you're winning and getting nominated for Academy Awards, iconic movies. But then when I grew up with with Robert De Niro, he was doing more like Meet the
Meet the
Parents,
Parents.
and he was
Yeah.
he was in
Okay.
this kind of like lull of like, oh, I hear he's good, but that was about like 15 years ago. So, and I think he's kind of
Interesting.
resurged, and like he's doing really unique stuff now and doing some cool stuff still with Scorsese and whatnot. So anyways, I didn't know what to get from Robert De Niro. Sometimes it feels like, are you phoning it in? This is kind of a comedy. I've never really seen you in comedies, but his comedic timing is so good,
Yeah.
in a way that I really have. I mean, and I wasn't bashing Meet the Parents. I think he's really funny in that one too, but he's good at playing this like straight man, and he knows how to like play that really well. It's just great seeing Robert De Niro give a shit in a
Yeah.
movie, because I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't always seem that way, and when he does, damn, he's good.
It's almost like he's the king of comedy.
Exactly. Oof, yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like I
We'll
think
edit that
this
out.
was coming off.
No, keep it in.
This was coming off The Untouchables. So I think like
Oh,
The
wow.
Untouchables he'd done before, which we did on the show, for me, one of my all-time favorite movies. But like he kind of, because much like you're saying, he's been on this kind of just this kick of, The Godfather Part 2.
Crime
just all
gangster
this stuff.
type, right?
Mhm.
And he wanted to sort of try his hand at a comedy. And like this, I mean, the thing is, I never would have thought of casting or putting him together with Charles Grodin. And he is incredible. I mean, for me, I'm jumping ahead, but I just want to talk about the scene with him pretending to be the FBI agent looking for money. That
Makes
my
it
scene,
God.
20s.
Oh, the
Oh.
best. The best.
and
Totally
he's
improv.
he's playing it so well, and he's talking to the guy next to him, and he's just, I was sitting there. It was a masterclass of just like, because for me, he's the dad from Beethoven, right?
Yeah, same.
And
Mhm.
so
Yep.
you
Yeah.
see him doing this, and that is, I think that's the scene for me where you just realize the absolute genius of the two of them put together is just creating something magic. And I think, was it Ryan? Did you mention that scene was largely improvised by?
Yes. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was improv so much that like when Charles Grodin like looks to the guy to his left, there's like more there's more dialogue that guy has, and I think it was cut out, but it was just so interesting to see. Like they loved it so much they gave him more lines. Like the whole thing was
Wow.
it's great.
So
But that-
good. And I was telling you guys, I've been to that bar, like that restaurant bar. It's in
Really?
Arizona, and they do not let you forget that it was part of Midnight
Is
Run.
it just like posters and pictures everywhere?
So many posters and pictures all over the place, signatures from De Niro and Grodin. It is basically the Midnight Run bar now. So they don't let you forget it, but it is funny seeing it in this context before they had all the movie posters up. It's like,
Speaking of context, guess what we've done? So this movie, if you haven't seen it, it's a brilliant movie. It's basically about bounty hunters. So you got Robert De Niro. He's a bounty hunter, a former cop. It's more complicated than that, and it all comes to a head actually with Dennis Farina, perfectly cast as always.
yes.
But it essentially tells a story about he has been sent by Joey Pantoliano,
Joey
to pick
Pants.
up Charles Grodin, who is an accountant who, it turns out, found out he was working for the mob, stole a bunch of money from the mob, and gave it to a bunch of charities. But he skipped out on a $450,000 bond. And so Robert De Niro has been offered, well, he says, you're going to pay me $100,000 to get him back. What then starts, he goes from LA to New York. He's got to get back to LA by midnight 5 days later. And so starts a very, very entertaining journey. It's basically, it was planes, trains, and automobiles
Yeah.
of just this thing.
It absolutely was.
Because it's, and it's, again, Grodin plays it like a master. Is him freaking out on the plane. That you genuinely believe that he's afraid of flying, but when you
Yeah.
later find out he's full of shit, you're like,
Bullshit.
oh my God.
He tries pulling that shit again to John Ashton. He's like,
Yeah.
Just
But
knocks
the
him out.
way he's like, no, and he's like, it's that scene, it's brilliant. And like you were saying, Will, it'd be far too easy a movie if you can bang him on a plane. So now it's a bus. If you're not on a bus, you're in a car. If you're not on a car, you're jumping a
And-
train, or trying to steal a biplane. You're floating down a river. you're
dude, the
stealing a
biplane
car.
scene, my God.
Yeah.
And what did it for, like, you really forget that, but they were smoking in every single one of these
Every
vehicles.
scene.
Everyone. Oh my
Ah,
God.
God, do you remember when the world used to just smell like cigarettes? That was the thing that really stood out to
In
me.
first class on that airplane,
Dude,
like with the spiral staircase behind him.
That airplane, I was like, what does the world become? Because I want to ride on that airplane.
Yeah.
They're having like big enough for like a dance hall in the middle of that first class. I was like, what the hell? That was awesome.
That was back when they had like a bar you could walk to on the
Yeah.
airplane.
Oh my
Gosh.
goodness.
Oh.
Yeah.
We used to
They
be
could have,
we used
they-
to be a civilization.
It used to be
Yeah.
a society. Exactly.
Well, that's even De Niro saying it. Like he's looking at the menu and he's like, "Ah, only in America. What a country." What
Yeah,
a country."
only in America.
So yeah, it's just. But once it kicks off, you know, like so you've got John Ashton as this great. I love it because he's the other bounty hunter. Like 3 times in the movie, De Niro
Yeah.
like Marvin and just decks him.
Such a great running gag.
Yeah.
I like audibly like belly
Yeah.
laughed like the second time it does it when you know what's happening, like you're just like Marvin, just keep doing it.
But
I
they
started
needed to
cracking
do
up.
it to set up for the whole thing
final
at the
time.
end. Like
Yeah.
it makes sense. Like the payoff in this is so
Yeah.
fantastic.
And
Great.
then also, it's Yaphet, right?
Yaphet
Yaphet
Kotto.
Kotto.
Ah,
Just MVP, man. I love Yaphet Kotto.
I had just watched Alien because it's amazing, but I never realized how fucking tall he is. Like
I
he
didn't
towers
realize that.
over everyone in this movie.
yeah.
Yeah, he seems average size in Alien, and then you realize,
Yeah.
oh no, everyone in that movie is
Yeah.
also super tall.
Yeah,
He
next
could
to
have
a
played the
Xeno-
alien. Yeah.
next
Yeah.
to a xenomorph, he looks a little
Yeah.
small. This is the first time I've seen him in anything besides Alien. I'd
Yeah,
never
true.
seen him in anything else.
He
For
was
me,
in
for me, it's Live and Let Die.
That's it.
I was
yeah,
gonna
That's the
say,
baddie from
yeah.
Live and Let Die.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's so I always knew him from that one. But like in this one, you know, the thing is, and it's kind of like I touched on at the beginning, the writing of this, George Gallo, he's the writer. And I just got done listening to the Blank Check series about Martin Brest and stuff, and that is
Mhm.
that he's great at directing other people's scripts. And this case, like the script is white hot, and it's like I said, if I had to, you know, any other movie where they're changing directions every 5 minutes, and you've got this many characters all sort of like, you know, chasing that. You feel like there'd be all sorts of plot holes of like, well, how did he get there, or how did he find it? It all makes sense. It's a complicated piece of music that is just being played to perfection, and like that's why I was so blown away by. You can never settle into just at all, because every 5 minutes.
I kept waiting for the thing. I'm like, I know these two characters intrinsically hate each other, but because we've been conditioned, we've seen movies like this before. You know, there's going to be a turning point where it clicks and they both connect and they start working together. And every time you get a glimpse of that, and it does happen, they both fuck each other over.
Yeah.
And it just
Mhm.
goes back to square one.
And you never
like,
know what's
right-
going to happen. You
Never.
you think that like, oh, they're friends now. Like they're
Right.
running towards the train, and then all of a sudden he like closes the
He's
door.
like,
and I'm like,
"Hey!"
oh shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's just drinking a carton of milk.
Yeah.
He's just
Yeah,
milk and cigarettes.
Oh my god. Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's also-
Grodin in this movie, I always get the sense that his character just kind of does like fucking with people. Like, you know, as slick as he is, and as much as he's trying to get out of a situation, there is a part of him where he's like, I'm kind of having fun messing with this guy.
When
And I
they go
kind of want to
visit
see
his
how far
wife,
I can
like,
push it.
Yeah, he's mediating between this guy and his wife, who he hasn't seen in 9 years.
Yeah.
I
I
can't
like-
even fathom that.
This if it's the subtlety of watch Grodin when De Niro is doing stuff, like the bit where De Niro's trying to buy the bus ticket and Grodin's just going, you know, he's just like doing
Yeah,
the,
that was so funny.
shakes of his head at the lady and like making eyes like, yeah, you know, this is what I have to deal with, kind of thing. I'm like,
This fucking
so
guy. Yeah,
good.
exactly. Yeah.
He's just killing it
Yeah.
in this movie, and like the fact that like also that De Niro like said, kind of like touching on, he's not overdoing it. He's not trying to play tough. He's just he really.
It's not a
really takes off-
caricature, you know?
No,
Like,
yeah,
Right.
there you go. That's great. And
Yeah.
you know what I really like, and I don't remember it because it'd been so long, but like his arc, the bit where like Yaphet goes like, "What are you smiling at?" He goes, "Oh, I feel like being a cop again."
Mm.
You know, and it's like that kind of thing that he was a good cop. Like the more that we find
Yeah.
out about it, he
Yeah.
wouldn't take it. He wouldn't go on the take. He was the only good cop. He paid for it as such, and at the end, he's like when he lets Grodin go, he's like, "Well, I got the bad guy, and I did what I said I was going to do. I proved it to myself. I don't
Right.
need this kind of like." It's got such a because even up until the end, much like you guys were just saying, is you never quite know where these guys stand with each other.
Yeah.
That you have that really cathartic last couple of minutes, and then and they don't over drag it out, but it's like it's kind of like just you don't often. It's quite sensitive between two men. And then that bit where Grodin's like, come back. He's so like, come back, and he gives him like $300,000 kind of thing, and then he's just gone.
He's had this bandolier of
Yeah.
$1,000 bills.
That's like the whole time.
The clock. I'm like, what? $300,000, crazy.
But
Loved it.
much like we said with Thelma and Louise, all location, like being on, like you
Oh
can
my
just
god.
this same thing. Like they're at no point are we shooting on a soundstage. We are in a city. We're in a desert. We're in a diner. We're on a river. We're in a car. We're in an actual train. You can see, you know, like because De Niro comes and jumps inside, and it's all, you know. The thing that surprised me is how much of Sedona got destroyed by these cars.
Dude, right? Yeah.
You know what?
Gosh,
I'm okay with it. Being from Arizona, fine.
The best train scene since Broken Arrow.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Another banger. But like from soup to nuts, this I can't say one thing in this movie that didn't work.
And Dennis Farina is the crime boss, like Joey
awesome.
Pants, and like you look at like who, it's such a perfect movie. You look at who is like almost cast in this. Like I have the list here is like for Jack Welch, it was Mel Gibson, Kurt Russell, Michael Keaton, Richard Gere, Burt Reynolds, Clint Eastwood, Charles Bronson, Gene Hackman, Don Johnson, Tommy Lee Jones, John Travolta, Schwarzenegger, and Stallone, of course. But like, and you Bill Murray and Steve Martin, like you could see it would just be a completely different movie versus like having De Niro and Charles Grodin together. Like it's so iconic.
I can't explain why Charles Grodin works. Like I don't know what he's doing, but it works. And there's like such like nuance in what he's doing. Like I don't know if that was on the page or is that him bringing it to it, because like if you know, if you were like casting in your mind, like his name wouldn't be in the top 100 of people I would think to be in this.
Right.
Like so it's almost like this like magic or mystery of like, why are you so freaking good in this movie, and also why weren't you like in a million other movies? I mean, I'm sure he was in other movies obviously, but like not to this scale. Like you someone said like you knew him from Beethoven, but like
his casting is the opposite of what Hollywood would do in the 90s and onward. You cast a fast talking Chris Tucker style, you know, like you got
48 hours
Eddie Murphy,
right?
Exactly. So it's just the loud, brash, funny, just cracking wise kind of guy. Whereas instead with Charles Grodin, you've got the buttoned up accountant white guy that very, like I said, is making sometimes his best jokes by not even saying anything. He's just making looks. He's very understated.
Yeah, very understated. Yeah,
and like
besides when he flips out, besides like on a plane, like those few moments when he starts having or pretends to have a panic attack. But he's not like it's not like 100 degrees this direction and 100 degrees that direction, polar opposites. It's more like one's this way and one's kind of in the middle, just kind of like just to bounce off of. Yeah,
they were gonna have Robin Williams play that part. Now,
see, and that would have been way too. That would have been way too. It would have been great, but I feel like that would suck so much energy out of the room. Yeah, it'd be lack of subtlety.
That's the beauty about Grodin is like he plays it so subtly, like you're just saying, like just.
I wonder if it's got to do with a little bit that Martin Brest is notorious for being like Fincher, multiple takes. You know,
really?
People down. Like, so a lot of people were like saying like people did not enjoy making this movie. De Niro was pissed making this movie. Yaphet said the same thing. Of like, you don't even know what you're giving anymore. But I think it's like, but maybe that sort of plays into a part of it.
Maybe.
Yeah, Martin Brest is kind of like notorious, you know, even though like Fincher is a perfectionist and works people pretty hard. The difference I've heard with Brest is he kind of sucks to work with. He's really difficult. Yeah, he's really, you understand why he's only made like 4 or 5 movies and hasn't made one since Geely.
Yeah,
you know,
that'll kill you.
That's a career killer right there.
But you understand why Ben Affleck, you know, you hear like Martin Brest wants you to be in a movie, you're like, yes, and then oops, you made Geely.
But he wrote it too. That's what they say. It's like more of the issue. There is one scene I really want to talk about actually, because I love scenes in movies where I'm like, how did they shoot that? And it was the bit where Grodin is stealing the biplane. And as he's stealing the biplane, De Niro sort of jumps on the side. Now, of course, we're getting shots where you see a stuntman, but when it is the camera mounted on the plane, they are on a plane and the plane is lifting up off the ground and coming back down to quite a height that I'm like, how are they doing that? I mean, clearly it must be on some sort of crane, but I'm like, well, that's De Niro and that's Grodin, and that plane is off the ground. Look in the background, that's 50 feet down. I'm like,
Yeah.
it was so.
That was impressive. I was
So
thinking that too.
impressive.
I'm like, this is like almost dangersly practical, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially with the helicopter as well.
yeah.
Dangerously practical. Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. Like back in the 90s, maybe, or when was it, the 80s, when you're like, you knew like maybe we shouldn't do this because like
Yeah.
the cost, like it's
Hold
too
my
dangerous.
deliverance. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so you're like, this looks sick. That looks so good though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we. I don't know if you. So have you seen Deliverance? Adam?
Yeah, Deliverance
Yeah.
is incredible. Yeah.
So like, when you get into the behind the scenes on that, because they didn't really have any budget, so they were all just doing it for real. Like they're out there on the boats for real.
So
like
he actually gets raped.
Yeah.
They shot that
He
practical.
was method.
That was practical. No, are you talking about like,
Demanded it.
jumping off? Are they jumping off a waterfall or
Well, it's
what's
like, no,
the
it's not.
stunt?
Anytime they're on the water, that's
Yeah.
them. But the bit John Voight climbing that cliff just did it for
Yeah.
real.
There's no insurance. Like they
Damn.
couldn't get insurance on it, right? That was the thing we
Jeez.
talked about. Yeah.
That's
So
crazy.
when you get into like how they're making out the movie, it's kind of similar to the River Wild actually, but like it was just like it's why it looks so good, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like you were saying as well. It looks good because they were limited by budget and insurance, so they couldn't afford stunt people. So the guys being macho said, "We'll just do it. We'll do it
Right.
ourselves." They almost got themselves in trouble a couple of times, but I think it only adds into the performance.
The budget went to keeping Burt Reynolds' hairpiece on.
Yeah. And that cost 10 million on its own.
So we've been talking about budgets as well. Like, we did 45 million for Thelma and Louise box office. So this in '88 made $80 million.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's like in
This is-
today's money is a gajillion dollars.
And this, you said this was after Beverly Hills Cop, right? This was like
This was his follow-up to
This
Beverly
was
Hills
4
Cop.
years after Beverly Hills Cop, and somehow John Ashton was 4 years younger than when he shot Beverly Hills Cop. He was
Yeah.
like 22 in this movie.
Yeah, he's kind of like a Benjamin Button. He's kind of aging in
Crazy.
reverse.
I was seeing it was a year. This came out a year after Lethal Weapon. I wonder if that was
wow.
part of like writing
Yeah.
that kind of odd
yeah,
couple
huh.
kind of stuff. I wonder if that was like a hot commodity.
Yeah, that
started doing a lot.
that makes sense. Yeah.
I really John Ashton is great in this movie.
So he's so good.
He's
I love
fantastic.
him as Taggart, but in this one I think he's every moment
It's the only other thing I've seen him in outside of Beverly Hills Cop. Like,
Yeah, it's a shame that other directors don't love him as much as Martin Brest loves him, because Martin Brest puts him in everything, and he really should be in more movies.
I think it was the only thing wrong with Beverly Hills Cop 3 is that he wasn't in it.
He's not in it. He is in 4.
Only thing. No other.
no other issues whatsoever.
He is in 4 though. Yes.
Yeah, but don't.
Oh,
I
that's
wonder.
good.
I wonder if you guys have any kind of things when you're watching movies as you've gotten older, when you're like, I do not like this kind of thing anymore. And after having kids, I think that's like a soft spot for me. And so when you see the scene where he goes home and he just like hasn't talked to his daughter in 9 years,
Dude.
that was like, I don't like you anymore. I mean, I still did, but I was like, you're down a notch for me, because that's fucked up. You just haven't talked to your child in 9 years, and now you're just like giving her a pat on the back. And
It's crazy to me, because how old could she have been when he left? Like 4 years old.
It felt nasty.
And then she comes, like, she embraces and goes and gives him money. Like it's nuts.
He doesn't take it. But the thing is, there's also
doesn't.
I know exactly what you mean, but like is his ex-wife married to a dirty cop?
I think that
they
was
made it sound
yeah,
like they made
yeah,
it
for
sound
sure.
like she
So,
is.
yeah,
He definitely like leans into that. Like
It's kind of like, and then the little thing.
Dennis
Taking a
Farina, I
bribe
think,
or
kind of made it sound. I think
Yeah.
Dennis Farina kind of helped, like, say, like,
He
oh,
takes
this
bribes
guy,
or
he
something
married
like
the captain now.
Yeah.
yeah.
So that it's
He's on the
almost
take.
like kind of like, I get what you mean, but what you'll see, like, so how old are your kids?
I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Right. Yeah. So we've actually talked about this on the podcast before, is that it's great watching these movies that you were a kid watching, and you're on the side of the kids, and then you become the parent, and
Yeah.
you're watching.
It's totally different.
The movie is a completely different movie, and you're also like, those kids are fucking way out of order as well. But like, because my kids are 16 now, and so there are certain movies that really hit as a parent. I mean, for Christ's sake, we were even talking about, what was the football one with Rick Moranis?
Little Giants.
Yeah, and like it's the little bit where the dad's always away and he's always at work, and he comes by just his son scoring a touchdown, and I remember watching that on a treadmill in Thailand, and I'm crying on a treadmill. I go, why am I crying right now? What is going on?
I don't even have kids,
Exactly.
but that shit tears me up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. So you watch that, you're just like, you didn't need to like, do that. Or even like affairs kind of stuff. There's certain plot
Yeah.
lines where it's like, you didn't have to go that route. Like that's a little
Mm.
too far for me. Just you could have just made it this instead. Like this was like, that broke my heart a little bit.
I think the one movie of the whole season we did where it just like we were like, "Ugh," was is Bad Boys 2. Bad Boys 2.
Yeah, another lens, like a product of its time for
Yeah, I
You're
haven't
just
seen
like,
that since
worse.
theaters. Was what moment was there a certain?
The whole fucking
the
movie.
entire film.
Yeah.
It is vulgar. It is
Because
racist,
when you
it is
see it in
sexist.
what was it, 2003?
It's
Right?
something
That
like
sounds
that.
about
Something
right.
like that.
High
When you see it back
school,
then,
yeah,
you're
something
like,
like that.
at that age, you're like, oh my God, it's like a 2.5-hour nonstop action blockbuster. And then you watch it with a modern lens and you're like, ooh, a lot of the dialogue and situations
opening
are like
shot
very
is upskirt, ass, drugs,
It's
tits.
trouble.
All the
Troubling.
Michael Bay stuff hasn't like aged super well with the way he
Well,
shows it.
Ambulance. Have you seen Ambulance? Because that
No, I haven't, and I
so
want
we
to.
did
But
that.
I've heard that was
First
good.
episode.
Good.
It's Bay like The Rock.
Jake Gyllenhaal, right?
Yeah.
But it's like if you liked Michael Bay, The Rock Michael Bay, it's The Rock
Yeah.
Michael Bay. And like it's
Yeah.
just it's
It's all the
was-
bombast without like the problematic overtones.
and without
Not
it
like
being-
Transformers, like girl, what's her name, bending over a car and just
Yeah.
like
yeah,
going
like
up her
that
legs and
introductory
stuff.
shot.
Yeah.
Just it's
A
just
lot less of that,
Yeah.
and a lot more of like the
But- and-
actual like people you see in
Yeah.
LA, like the disco cowboy who walks
The
around
Bad
my
Bo-
neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah, like-
hey.
Bad Boys 2 is like, it was like way more homophobic than I remember. Like,
Oh my God.
but
Yeah.
I will say this, like through that lens, I just recently watched Bad Boys 3 and 4 back to back, and they capture all of the Michael Bay bombast in such a fun way that they're enjoyable films, like from that perspective.
yeah.
Like,
I've got to
they're
watch that
good
third one
blockbusters.
again. Actually, I was like,
good.
because
They look like Michael Bay movies. It's great.
Yeah. All right. Okay, guys. Well, look, we could wax lyrical about these all day. But what we have to do now is try and pin down. We've got to crown a champion. That's what we like to do here. Is sort of what is the one that best represents, like
it's
America
tough.
best represents the intrinsic nature of a cross American road trip.
I know what the answer is. It's tough. Like Beavis and Butthead is my America. Like that's
And it's the winner. Good. That's the episode, everybody.
And all done. That's a wrap.
Yeah. And but I'm curious to I still it's got to be Midnight Run because I think that captures so much more of a real America. We ran into this when we did The Iron Giant, but that because it's an animated movie, like kind of loses a point. But I think Midnight Run, like, I mean, they run a fucking skid mark across America like that. Just they're all over this fucker.
So
Yeah.
I agree with you, but like what I feel like because with Midnight Run it's constant kind of like like you said, the planes, trains, and automobile of it all.
Yeah.
Is they're constantly put in these situations and like these sort of heightened situations almost. But with Thelma and Louise, it is what we experience outside of all the robbing and stuff like that. But the quintessential road trip of in a car with a map, picking a road, driving down it, and the little things that I liked are the stopping at gas stations and fueling up and getting snacks and like like the feel of those small towns. So I would sort of like contend that I wouldn't rule out Thelma and Louise because it does have that very much like just the momentum of a journey.
Yeah, you're positing that the fact that they are on planes and also trains takes away from the road car.
Well,
like
I'm just stirring the pot a little bit because
who hates women now?
So let's throw, Will, what are you thinking, buddy? Throw your hat in the ring here.
Beavis and Butthead is the best. No.
Hey, if you think so, go for it.
No. I really, I just love Midnight Run so much. I told you guys I bought it on 4K recently just to rewatch it, and I just think it's so good. And I hear what you're saying, Ollie, about like the actual road trip aspect of it. For me, where Thelma and Louise maybe loses a point in that category is it's a road trip, but it's not like a cross-country road trip. You're not seeing so much of the diversity of like America and stuff. So I think that's where Midnight Run then gains a point back and puts it kind of over the top for me. And also just because I famously don't like long road trips. If I'm in the car for more than 45 minutes, I get like crabby. I just don't want to do it.
You're in the wrong country and city, my friend.
Yes. And I have to do it all the time going back from LA to, Arizona. So it's frustrating for me. But and I do like I like the frustration of, because this has even happened to me going from state to state of like, oh, I'm booked for my flight. Oh, the flight got canceled, all this. Okay, I got to find another mode of transportation. Oh, that's fallen through. Oh, like that's happened to me numerous times. So the frustration of like the midnight run of like, okay, I need to find another mode of transportation to get somewhere has happened to me. And that feels a lot more relatable, that aspect of it.
And then, okay, so Adam, where are you leaning? It looks like we've got two midnight run leans. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm torn. Because I think that Thelma and Louise, sometimes I don't know how to describe a movie. It's meaty. I feel like there's a lot to chew on. It's doing stuff. I feel like it has more to say about culture, and so I think it's a better, like, this sounds like such like a lame thing to say, but an Oscar movie, like it feels like it's that, or
more prestigious for sure.
It has more prestigious, has substance to it.
Yeah.
Now I think that Midnight Run is just damn enjoyable.
Yeah,
I could see myself like almost like a cozy movie. I could see myself watching Midnight Run like once a year now for the rest of my life.
I'd rather rewatch Midnight Run than I would.
I'd much rather rewatch Midnight Run,
but
just because it is a damn good time. It is fun. It's well written, well acted, well made. Whereas Thelma and Louise is more of like, I feel like I would watch Thelma and Louise if I wanted to write something, or if I wanted to direct something. It feels meaty, and I feel like I'm getting like an auteur kind of perspective. Whereas Midnight Run is just, you're signing up for a damn good time, and this is just going to be a blast.
Thelma and Louise is a movie you got to be in the mood for,
Totally.
Whereas Midnight Run you could throw on anytime, or if it's already on, you'll kind of tune in and watch it at any point. You'll have fun. I think
you can't go wrong, because I think that if I wanted to show a bunch of my friends like a good time, I'm hosting a movie night, Midnight Run is just going to be a crowd pleaser. But if I want to show one friend who's like deep into like film, and we're diving into like film stuff, I could be like, dude, Thelma and Louise is like hitting these things, scratching that itch. For the sake of this conversation, I'll go Midnight Run, because I feel like it was kind of like the perfect marriage of well made, so good acting. It was a fantastic movie. I don't want to belittle it by saying it was just a fun time. No, because it's really well made and well written and all those things. So I'll go Midnight Run.
I mean, it does take, we do get LA, we do get New York, we do get Vegas, we do get Arizona, we do get Sedona, we do get, small towns, big towns. We even end up on a native reservation at some point. So I must be honest, if you're sitting there with a little, box to tick, 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 you've got a whole bunch of stuff when it comes to Midnight Run. But much like you said, it is a movie you could throw on anytime, guaranteed to have a good time. So while there's no argument from any of us here that Midnight Run, I think, is the best, most fun movie that we had this week, we're also in pretty much lockstep about the champion here at the United States of Movie Podcast, best road trip movie to represent America, at least until we do another episode to try and topple it, is Midnight Run, 1988's Midnight Run, directed by Martin Brest, Robert De Niro, Charles Grodin, and an incredible cast. It is not available for streaming anywhere, but as you've heard from us, we highly, highly recommend buying it and making it a part of your library, because it was wow. Yeah. Now, usually this part of the show, before we wrap up, we do like to talk about also rans. Were there any other road trip movies that kind of like popped up in your head? Like for me, it would have been Smokey and the Bandit. The
that's a good
first one I ever did, the one that got me into American movies and things like that. What about you guys?
I mean, I think we should say, like, we made our point to exclude movies we've already done on previous episodes, just to kind of clear that out. But I think a Cannonball Run was another like fun, insane one.
Point.
Like think about it, or like obvious Road Trip is the obvious one, but I don't know, like it's another movie you had to be from a certain time in the 2000s to really appreciate. But
Euro Trip has won that in the test of time.
Yeah, Rain Man was another one. Like I
Rain
thought
Man.
that, like, but that's a good one. But
I was thinking. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Will. Yeah, you go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say that my only other thought at the time was Vacation, National Lampoon's Vacation. I was like, that's the only other one I can think of really that jumps to mind. But I landed on Beavis and Butthead so fast, I didn't really consider too much else.
I think once you mention road trip, the idea of doing a road trip episode, both of us like just lit up with that movie in mind for some reason. That just
Right.
triggered it. Yeah.
Because we're children. And then
Yeah.
so Adam, what about you, man? What are some of the movies that you were maybe circling?
So, just a good movie that I hadn't seen in a while. I thought of Little Miss Sunshine. I thought
That's
that'd be kind of a
great. Yeah.
fun getting in
I've
the
never
van,
seen
and
that. I've heard it's
Yeah.
great.
Oh,
it's
very good,
great.
very good.
It's
Yeah.
great. To go to using this podcast as an excuse to watch a movie I've been wanting to see and hadn't seen. I threw out Paper Moon, but I'd never seen it. I don't know. I think the whole movie takes place in Kansas, but I think they're driving around all the time. So I don't know how much we'd be capturing in a road trip. So I don't know if that would have worked. And then I didn't want to go too artsy fartsy. I don't know if you guys, I don't know how old you guys go in your movies, but I'd love a screwball comedy from like the 30s and 40s. And one of my favorites is It Happened One Night. Have you guys seen this movie?
No.
Anyone
That's
can
one of my
Google.
favorite movies. I'm surprised I didn't think about that till just
It's
now.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's so real quick for people to pitch my pitch for you
Please.
listeners out there and for you three. So these two people on a road trip together, that's great. Cat and dog kind of fight, but you have Clark Gable, and his character was like so good and charismatic that they modeled Bugs Bunny after his character. That's when you get the iconic like lifting the leg up and putting the leg out to hitchhike to like try and pick up a driver by
Oh,
putting
shit.
like your hiked up leg out there. That originated that. So it almost like is like the first road trip movie like ever made. It feels like, and also it's one of only 3 movies ever to win the top 5 Academy Awards of picture, director, writing, and then actor and actress.
Yeah, it's
Only
a Capra
only
movie.
3 movies
Wow.
have ever done it, and
Yeah,
it's
so
the
that's
first one to do it.
That's why Will is such an integral part of this podcast, is because Ryan and I feel like our movie knowledge kind of like we start from the 80s and move forwards.
Right.
And like Will is really good about sort of bringing stuff, Giant when we were doing Texas and
Oh, great.
like things like that. So
The giant spider invasion.
The best one.
For Wisconsin, I think I mentioned, or Michigan.
Yeah,
Wisconsin,
yeah.
And then
Another
also
fucking
we
banger.
did them exclamation mark,
Them,
right?
Or
yes.
New Mexico.
New Mexico, yeah.
Yeah.
See, you get it. That's right.
Yeah.
Like,
So
since-
cool. No, I think that's what's so fucking cool about like getting a plethora of the state and different times and what they're trying to capture. And even if it works or doesn't work, it's an interesting conversation about
Always.
what they're
Yeah.
trying to what they're trying to do with it, and how them could only like exist in New Mexico because that's where like bomb testings were happening. I think that's so
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
we
We did
it back to back with
Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer, so it was
Right,
basically
yeah.
like a sequel. to
Oh, that
Oppenheimer.
would go
Yeah.
really well together. That's,
Yeah.
that's super
The
cool.
movie, that's like what's the movie company that makes the shitty off-brand like Atlantic
Yeah,
Rim?
I know the one you mean.
Oh, what's
Oh,
the
I don't know.
Oh, The Asylum.
The Asylum? Like if
yeah.
that would be like their Oppenheimer would be like, no, this needs more fucking aliens. Like
Mm,
it's
yeah.
more giant monsters. That'd be
But
theirs.
yeah, it happened one night. I can't recommend it enough, especially
Love
if you like those black and white screwball comedies where the dialogue is just whip fast. It's
Ooh, I'm into
incredible.
that.
That is one of my favorite movies. I do love that film.
Bang that one on the list. I'm just excited for you, Adam, because like we've
Yeah.
really had such a fun time, like doing this adventure, going around and like finding these different nuance for the states. Like for you,
Yeah.
you've got really fun ahead of you. Like it's going to be good fun.
The craziest-
yeah.
The craziest thing is when you meet people and you're like, oh, where are you from? And you're like, oh, when you like, let's say, like, oh, you're from Michigan. Like, what's the most Michigan movie you can think of? And they'll rattle something off, and they're like, oh, what did you pick? And you're like, I don't remember. And
Yeah,
like,
we
we never
never
remember. We're reluctant to remember two of the movies we did for each state. I couldn't
Yeah,
fucking
and
tell
there's
you.
always the third we can't remember.
Yeah.
But
I have the Google Doc pulled up. I'm like, yeah.
But we'll always remember the road trip movies.
Yeah,
That's
for
right.
real.
That's right.
Well, I tell you what, very quickly. So, guys, if you want to know what we're going to be doing next week, guys, it's something that I've been toying around with. It's what we're going to do next week is we're going to do alternate America.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it's like it could be sort of dystopian, it could be future, it could be retro, the past. But it's a different America. So it could be in a parallel universe. It could be Panem if we're doing, like the Hunger Games or something like that. So get thinking into like your alternate
Hell yeah.
America, to see we can get down to a sort of a slightly different genre. But outside of that, Adam, if you want to see more of Adam, like I said, if you love movies as much as we do and you really want to get into the nitty gritty, check him out as Entertain the Elk. But also, if you also want to get into like a really nuanced conversation about these movies, bouncing around America. Make sure you tune into 50 States of Cinema as well. Adam, really, thanks so much for coming on to the show. You're welcome back anytime if you want to.
Thank you so much. I would love that. It was a
Yeah, of
blast
course.
talking to you guys. It was nice meeting you and getting to talk
Yeah.
about movies with you. It was
Yeah.
a super fun conversation.
For sure, man.
It's the conversation will continue here on the show. Now, of course, if you want to find anything more about me, you can find me as That Englishman in Texas, or you can find me Ollie Pettigrew on Facebook. Very often on Mondays, I'm doing videos about movies and the movies that we're doing on the show. Will, you can find him as Entitled Willennial. He's got a huge, massive, just wall of movies, and on his TikTok, you can find him recommending movies you may not have heard of, or if you want to approach it, Ryan, he's got these incredible poster designs and merch from the show and redesigned movie posters and stuff. You can find him as Rhino Digital, RYNO Digital on Threadless, things like that. As always, if you are listening, do us a favor if you haven't, give us a rating. Find us on Facebook, find us on Reddit, come and join the conversation. And if you're watching us on YouTube, do us a favor, subscribe, drop a comment, join in the conversation, because for us, we just love joining in and talking about movies. And we'll be doing it every week for as long as we can do this for.
As long as there's movies.
That's right. So from me, from Ryan, from Will, and from Adam, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the United States of a Movie Podcast.